Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Jens Pausberg. While people are joining, let me welcome you all. So this is yet another virtual meeting. And the question really in front of us is how do we organize a virtual conference so that everybody gets a lot out of it? And so today we're here to discuss best practices as they are emerging very quickly in ACM. And today we are doing it from the angle of a SIG that has a single conference. And so in a normal year, I would say a single conference that's maybe 100 to 300 people. And so we're going to take the angle of what can we do to make such a conference really good. And of course, there are many virtual conferences coming up and also many in that range. And so just want to tell you, we have great speakers and we've allocated half the time for presentations and half the time for questions and discussion. And so plenty of time to get all your questions out there. So we'll have the leaders of the ACM task force on virtual conferences present. And then we have the leaders of 5 recent virtual ACM conferences will present. And then finally, we'll get into tool support for virtual conferences and we'll have some presentations there as well. And so, as you know, the former ACM president, Sherry Pancake, started the virtual task force on the task force on virtual conferences. Maybe it was virtual as well, for all we know. And the task force delivered its report in April and just smack full of insights and practical advice. And so they will present. And then we will have in the order in which the conferences happen, we'll have presentations of SPLOS, SAC, PLDI, and then most recently STOC and EC. And lots of experiences and lessons learned in many dimensions. And let's discuss. And some of these conferences already have reports out there that we can read. And then, of course, there's the whole space of tool support for virtual conferences. And so, of course, we have a meeting on Zoom going on right now. There are more tools. We'll have presentations of a few of them. And there are more. And so that's one of the goals for today is to just get everybody's input on what tools do we know about that we should all know about. So that's it. So we have all these speakers, and of course ACM is going to have close to 100 virtual conferences until the end of this calendar year. And who knows, maybe there'll be more conferences in 2021. So my goal really is that let's make those conferences a good experience for everybody. So today, plenty of time for questions. Please ask. The way you can do it is in the participants thing at the bottom, click and then click on raise hand. As you know, it works in Zoom, and then whoever is the session chair will know to look there. Or if you prefer, you can write something in the chat window and then we can pick up questions that way. So the session chair will also monitor the chat window. And then other than that, so today we are focusing on the SIGs with a single conference. So special welcome to you from SIG Access, SIG ADA, SIG App, SIG Bio, SIG CAS, SIG Doc, SIG Ecom, SIG Evo, SIG IT, SIG Log, SIG NIS, SIG SAM, SIG Spatial, and SIG UCCS. This is specially for you, but everyone is more than welcome to ask questions. But what we'll do is that we'll try to move you people from those 14 SIGs to the front of the line for questions. And then finally, let me just say a special welcome to Vicky Hansen, our former president and now CEO of ACM. And very special welcome to Joan Feigenbaum, who's our new ACM vice president. And Joan, over to you.
Thank you, Jens. So I'm 2 weeks into my term as ACM vice president. And one of the issues that I wanted to work on that motivated me to run for vice president was an issue that I know is near and dear to some of your hearts, which is climate change and environmental impact of our methods of, both conducting and disseminating computer science research. And that leads naturally to my wanting to foster really excellent virtual conferencing experiences. So it has been determined that there will be, and that's actually not my only reason for wanting to, I guess I'm independently interested in virtual conferences as well as interested in environmental impact. And the two, the two are closely related. Let's put it that way. Okay, so I think that there's going to be, well, I know there's going to be an ACM standing committee on virtual conferences. And it has a number of goals. One is, I think the first important goal that has to be achieved is that ACM has to be cognizant of all of the developments in virtual conferences, has to understand and keep track of both the good and the bad experiences that the SIGs are having running virtual conferences. It has to foster development and adoption of good virtual conferencing practices. So technology, but also non-technological conference practices. Like, do you want to have local hubs in a big decentralized conference? How do you do that? ACM really has to be on top of this. ACM also has to be on top of the finances of virtual conferences, because, traditional face-to-face conferences, one big component of having year after year successful conferences is being on top of the finances. And ACM is actually pretty good at this. I mean, ACM has procedures and practices in place that facilitate financial health of SIGs and conferences. Some people complain about ACM's practices and procedures, but people complain about any practices and procedures. And I'd say over the years, ACM's financial awareness and financial procedures have generally worked, but we need completely different ones for virtual conferences. And finally, I just want to say that I anticipate that even after the COVID-19 crisis is completely solved, if in fact it is ever completely solved, which I guess it probably will be, but I won't speculate about virology. Bad enough I'm speculating about virtual conferences. Anyway, I think that we will have some virtual conferences, even if physically it's safe to have face-to-face conferences. Now that we've gotten into the whole virtual conference thing, I think we will continue to have them. And I also think we will continue to have hybrid conferences because they have benefits. In addition to the environmental benefits and the public health benefits, they have other benefits. And one thing I've been hearing all my life is that there are researchers and potential researchers who are at serious disadvantage if they have to travel a lot and travel long distances. In particular, parents of young children. This has been put forth as a women's issue at various times. This, frankly, had never been my issue, but I acknowledge that it is an issue. And that's another reason to really care about virtual conferences and to expect them to persist past the COVID-19 era. So I think I'm going to be the chair of this Standing Committee on Virtual Conferences, and I'd like to know all about what you're doing and what works and what doesn't work. And if any of you wants to, arrange a one-on-one meeting or just have an email exchange, please let me know. Anything you have to say about virtual conferences, technology, finances, etc.
Wonderful. Many thanks for the inspiring words. And I'm happy to hear we will have a standing committee, and equally happy that you will chair it. So wonderful. Now we are jumping straight into our program, and I'm going to chair the first session, and then later Jenna Matthews will chair the second session, and then Benjamin Pierce will chair the final session. And I intend to interleave questions. So whenever you have questions, please either press the raise hand button or write in chat, and I'll get to your questions absolutely as we go along, and we don't interrupt the speaker too much. So our first session here is plainly a report and thoughts from the ACM task force on virtual conferences. And the three leaders are all with us. We have Jenna Matthews and Krista Lopez, who were the two chairs of the task force, and Benjamin Pierce, who was the executive editor of the report. And I believe all three of them are going to speak. And so remind me, who of you are going to speak first?
I think I'm going to speak first, but Benjamin's going to share the slides.
Yeah, wonderful.
Need to make him a host, our co-host.
This is working.
Terrific. Okay, hi everybody. I'm thrilled that you're all here to talk about this, and I'm thrilled to report some of the goings-on in the last half year on best practices for virtual conferences. Jens already introduced us a bit. Here's a bunch of details about us. If you wanted to reach out to us directly with questions, I'm sure you can find our email from these. The only other thing I'll mention is that really Kristen, Benjamin, and I all kind of served as three co-chairs. It just wasn't official that way, and we all did a lot of the editing of the document. Okay, on to the next slide, if you could, Benjamin. So here's just a little bit of a look at where we've been and where we're going. You could kind of think about the time from March to May of this year as just a mad scramble. You know, that was, you know, really unexpected to have to move to virtual conferencing, and ASPLOS and IEEE VR and SAC did amazing things, and we learned a lot of wonderful things from their experiences. Then you can kind of think of maybe phase 2 as being last month and this month, where maybe we're a little clearer what's going on, but there's a lot of experiments happening. So maybe creative chaos. Hopefully we're still learning a lot. And we like to think that maybe as we move into August, it will become more harvesting and consolidation. You know, really understanding and collecting data about the application of what we believe are the best principles and practices from what we've learned so far. Okay, next slide, please. So just a teeny bit of dates and, you know, when things happened with this task force and who else was involved. Kristen, Benjamin, and I wrote a proposal for an ACM task force on conference virtualization and sent that, I think maybe it was to Vicki and Pat and Jeff Jortner, who was the last SGB chair, on March 7th. And you can see ACM didn't let grass grow under their feet. They, Cherry Pancake officially formed a task force on March 13th. So that we're really thankful for that quick action on their part. And we didn't let too much grow under our feet either. We had a 27-page report produced by April 5th because we really felt like a lot of people desperately needed this information. And even at the time that we released that 27-page report, there was already more appendices than we put in the official report, but it's been continuing to grow in a live Google Doc, and it is that live Google Doc version that I would especially recommend that you look at, because that's how you'll get all the latest and greatest stuff. It is 47 pages and growing, and all the members of the task force listed here did amazing work and really dedicated to produce that kind of information so quickly. So huge thanks and shout out to all of them, including Vicki and Donna, who I believe are on this call. Is anyone else on this call? Maybe not. Okay. Next slide, please.
Pat's on the call as well.
Oh, Pat's on the call. Big shout out to Pat as well. Sorry, Pat, I hadn't seen you in the list of participants. Okay, so now I'm turning it over to Benjamin, but I'll be back.
Okay. So let's dive right in and talk about what makes virtual conferences work. There are really, we boiled it down for purposes of this short discussion. You can see the long version in the task force report, but we really think it comes down to 5 basic things. So pop quiz, what are the 5 basic things? What do you think? Obviously not technology, not what goes in the technical program, that's easy. Technology is not so easy, we'll get to it, but it's not the most critical thing. The most critical thing is people. Second most critical thing, also people. Third, people. Can you guess the fourth and fifth? Okay, so it's really, really all about people. Not technology, not the technical program, people. Let me explain. So first of all, people have to organize the conference, and organizing a virtual conference requires just as much work, just as much discussion, just as many meetings, just as many emails, just as much careful thought as organizing a physical conference, if not more. Second, people at the conference need to be able to find their way. They need to be able to figure out what's going on, figure out what's happening next, figure out who's there and how to connect with those people. Third, once they've figured out who's there to connect with, they need to be able to actually connect. And the place where the virtual place where the conference is needs to foster those connections in just the same way as the snacks and coffee and lunches do at physical conferences. One issue that has surprised some people coming into this area fresh is that an absolutely critical issue that really does belong on the list of 5 most critical things is time zones. The fact that people sleep at different times. That will fundamentally affect and should fundamentally affect every aspect of the design of your conference. And finally, people misbehave sometimes. And this is something that, of course, we all hope will not afflict our particular conference, but we all know that it can happen, and it's something that is really critical to bear in mind, because if it does happen, you have to get the response right. Okay, so let's dive into the first couple of those, and then I'll hand over to Krista and Gina to talk about the others. So first of all, organizing, planning, and running a virtual conference. The most basic point to come away with from this little section is that a virtual conference can be just a Zoom meeting or a couple of Zoom meetings. It can be, but it's a really sad thing if that's what it is. So a video conference, just a Zoom meeting like what we're having here, is not a conference. It's certainly not a replacement for a physical conference, and it's nowhere near what can be done with a virtual conference. So a plain old video conference is a single event, or perhaps a few events that are not very connected, with a focus on either one-to-many or maybe a few-to-a-few audio-visual communication. A virtual conference has many more things. It has a lot of events connected over the course of several days. The social networking aspect is as important, or many people would say much more important, than what goes on in the big room. The communication happens both during formal sessions, but especially around and between and beyond and during the formal sessions. So presence and visibility, and the ability to chat by text, and the ability to create ad hoc video sessions or audio sessions is completely critical. And the fact that information from the conference and in the conference persists and accumulates over time. Okay, the organizing committee is something to think about very carefully. And this is a big topic. You should read about it in our task force report and in the reports of all of the virtual conferences that are sharing their experiences now. But just a few points to think about are, you should start early, just like with a physical conference. You should include tech-savvy people for figuring out the platform. You should identify people that are going to act as hosts for the video conferencing parts, session chairs, moderators. You will need a lot of student volunteers, just as many as at a physical conference. And all of these people will need some organizational structure to work together well. Okay, what about people finding each other? So people really, the participants at these virtual events, let me step back. Physical conferences have been very well tuned over the decades and maybe even centuries for helping people figure out what's going on. And it's easy because you know, somebody comes out of the session room and makes a big announcement in a loud voice. Now it's time to come to the session. Now it's time to go out and have some coffee. And then you go out and have coffee and it's clear what to do because everybody is in the same room. At a virtual conference, everybody is sitting alone in their own office or bedroom or whatever, with all of the distractions of their house and their family and their email and the rest of their life coming at them all the time. So you really need to be louder about what's happening and what people should do and when they should do it and who they should do it with. So somebody needs to be sending out announcements, broadcasting to everybody in the conference, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, multiple times a day, just to let people know what's going on. Of course, this is especially true in multi-track complicated conferences, but even for single track conferences, it's easy for people to just slip through the tracks and stop paying attention. So you need to keep reminding them. Okay, I think this is where I'm supposed to hand over to Krista. Is that right, Krista?
Sure.
Great, go for it.
All right, so I think this is the third part that's important, people connecting. And so go ahead, change the slide, Benjamin. You know, for those of us who have now been citizens of Zoom and video conferences, as Benjamin said, virtual conferences can be as sad as just what we are doing right now, but they can be a lot more. Okay, that's the important thing that I think everybody needs to be aware, that you can go well beyond a Zoom meeting. And so think of, you know, the most value of the conferences, I think everybody agrees, is the networking that comes from them, networking at several levels, right? And it's not possible to completely recreate what goes on in a physical meeting in the virtual space, but it's possible to get close. And especially if organizers kind of think through what it means. So in a physical conference, just the fact that you are contained in the hotel or whatever the venue, it promotes people kind of bumping into each other in the corridors, and you know this person who knows that person, and so that kind of we've learned how to function in those kinds of networks. But physical conference, we don't have that. So we, the organizers, need to build it in. That's the important thing. I mean, if you want, if you don't have time, maybe you just do a Zoom meeting and that's the end of it, but it's really sad. If you do have time and you really want to promote the healthy function of the community, think about social networking as the main focus of organizing the conference. And so you need to build it in. And so these are some of the questions. How will people talk to each other beyond the technical presentations? How will people bond? How will newcomers get into the fabric of the existing community? How will the social experience be memorable? Will people remember, 2 years later, just like we remember, that conference in wherever in Vancouver that we bumped somebody on the street? How will this happen? How will people remember the conference 2 years from now? So those are all things that I think organizers can and probably should think when organizing the virtual conference. Benjamin, next slide. So here's some suggestions, and these suggestions come from some early experiences. Just so a little bit of background on my part, I have been involved with virtual conferences for a very long time, since almost 10 years. And I've been dealing with them in the context of a very niche community. It's a virtual reality platform that I've been involved with, similar to like a 3D game, but it's like Second Life for those of you who remember. So we actually have been having a virtual conference every year since 2013. So I gained a lot of experience by seeing how that community organizes that conference, and also now the early months of experiences that I also inform what works and some suggestions for what you might do to foster informal networking. So here's some bullet lists. So use the organization itself as a social networking mechanism. So involve people from your community, involve student volunteers, younger members of their community, talk to each other, in the process of organizing a conference is a social networking opportunity. During the conference, for example, you can make sure to, instead of filling the entire time with, scheduled presentations, just make sure to leave some space for social interaction. Make sure to have breaks, and those breaks actually may be as long as the time allocated for the formal presentations. You can have 1 hour breaks for people to talk to each other and do other things. Encourage presenters to be available after their talks for smaller interactions, right? So basically take it offline, take it off stage, and encourage them to be available to talk with people who have questions about their talks. Promote the organization of Birds of a Feather and other bottom-up events. So be flexible. If people want to create something, promote that, make it visible, let other people know that is going on. Promote, often neglected parts of conferences that are the posters and demo tracks. Those are really good opportunities. We already knew that these are really good opportunities for social networking. We know that. I think it's even more clear in a virtual conference setting. So let's continue to promote even more those posters and the demo tracks. There's always social butterflies in every community. Those are the people who know everybody, who everybody knows, that are well regarded in the community. So take advantage of those people to make the conference lively, right? To have them, post in whatever channels you have available. Have them really connect the people. Organize mentoring sessions. You may want to think about it. Actually, have formal mentoring sessions or informal, whatever works. Another thing that has been working really well is to bring famous members of the community for kind of up close Ask Me Anything sessions. So these tend to be like either Zoom meetings with everybody or just a 2-person Zoom meeting with all the questions coming on chat or something like that. But this has been super successful in the conferences that I have been kind of monitoring over the past few months. Organize live music events. Why not? Maybe somebody actually plays something from your community, and it's always fun to do it in a physical conference. It's also fun to do it in a virtual conference. Or you can hire. There's lots of good artists out there that are out of jobs, out of gigs, and this would be a good opportunity to kind of help them out. Also remind people to interact at every opportunity and lead by example. So if you're organizing a virtual conference, you have to be out there, interacting with people, showing yourself, making yourself visible so that others kind of think that, oh, it's okay actually to, chat or post or whatever, it's okay. So lead by example. Next one, Benjamin. All right, so let me talk about time zones. Time zones is a big pain in the behind. And, but it starts with actually knowing your community. Where are the people of your community? So in certain cases, certain communities, the problem actually doesn't exist. If your community is basically distributed between America and Europe, this is very easy, okay? There's, a big block of 5 to 7 hours during the day where everybody's awake and there's no problem. If, however, your community has people all over the world, then it's a problem, and you have to think about it. You have to set the rhythm of the conference to serve the community, the people who you want to attend the conference. And basically, if you force people to be awake in the middle of the night, chances are that they will not be awake in the middle of the night. So basically, if you say, oh, I expect you to be awake, probably those people will not be able to attend the conference. And you should be aware of that. So next slide, Benjamin. So here are some workable approaches. So one of them is stick to a time zone. That's it. Maybe next year, if this is to be continued, the virtual conference is to be continued, maybe switch it around the globe. Every time that you do the conference, you just distribute it through the years. distribute the pain through the ears. So that's one possible approach. Another approach, which was what we did for the International Conference of Social Engineering just last week, was the follow the sun approach. So we have these blocks of 3 hours that were basically following the sun, where 2/3 of the world is awake. And so 2/3 of the world can participate at any given time, and while 1/3 is asleep and can catch up when they wake up. Another approach is to have sort of a repeat a mirrored schedule. So you do the program for 7 hours or whatever, and then you have a break, and then you repeat the exact same program in the other 7 hours or whatever. So I have some pictures, Benjamin, if you can just go forward. So this is follow the sun. Is basically literally follow the sun. You just have, we called it the Pacific time band, the Indian time band, and the Atlantic time band, because this is really periods of time that are centered on the major oceans of the earth. And each one of them, you have either Europe and Asia, Europe and America, or America and Asia. They are the people who are awake. Next one, Benjamin. So mirror schedule, it's the picture of what I just said. You have the program and then you repeat it again while the rest, the other half of the world is awake. All right, and so I pass the baton here to Gina.
Thanks, Krista. Okay, so Benjamin mentioned at the beginning that one of the other problems is people misbehaving. In other words, privacy and security issues. Benjamin, can you advance to the next slide? I'm going to highlight 2 aspects of this that I think are especially worth dealing with. One is actively preparing to deal with disruption rather than just hoping it won't happen. Some good examples of that are stress testing the platforms and meeting configurations that you set up from the perspective of a deliberately disruptive attendee. That kind of perverse adversarial testing, that's something we understand pretty well as computer scientists. We just have to apply it in this context. Some examples of disruptive things that attendees can do. One is not so nasty or deliberate, just accidental unmuting. I'm sure you've been in many meetings where you have to again and again say, oh, you need to be muted. And I'm sure you've heard of Zoom bombing, the kind of disruptive screen sharing. Some other ones are sharing an offensive virtual background, maybe renaming who you are to be a distinguished member of the community, trying to impersonate them. There's even a way to scribble over Zoom screens, annotations, and there's ways to disable that. But if you're not looking for it, you might not even be able to tell who's scribbling. It can be incredibly disruptive in the moment. So prepare to deal with that and set your configurations appropriately. And not only that, have someone dedicated to dealing with it in the moment. You cannot expect a speaker to deal with that and be able to continue. So you need a staff person on hand who is practiced with dealing with disruptions and ready to do it. Kick people out, mute them, whatever needs to be done, figure out who's annotating, turn on whatever needs to be done. Disable what you don't need, enable only what you do need, and if what you do need is abused, know how to respond. Okay, next slide. Another really important thing is also about preparing ahead of time, and that is to have an explicit code of conduct that lays out expected behavior for hosts and for participants. So some questions to ask for hosts is, are they recording or not? Everyone should know that. How long what's going to happen to those recordings? How long are they going to be retained? How are they going to be posted and shared? Other things like, how are attendees being observed? There's certain ways to, like, there was a Zoom option to track attendee attention, like how often they had Zoom full screen. Are you doing that or not? Will the chat log be retained? Will hosts have access to private chats? All that should be determined ahead of time, not left to chance. And similarly for attendees, just like we might establish for a meeting, the ground rules for whether you can quote someone or not, or whether you can take, in physical situations, we have a lot more social etiquette about, can I just take, a million pictures of someone? Can I, but here, can I screenshot? Can I take with my cell phone an audio or visual recording? For personal use, for posting, all of that, making it super clear is wise, so that you have something to go back to if and point to if you have people violating those social norms. Okay, next. And I wanted quickly to put a wish list item, a request. This is something I actually had kind of hoped we would have done before this meeting, but we didn't. And if there's anyone here who would like to help us with this, we already kind of have a set of core questions that have been asked at a number of conferences, but I think we could really do well to get one-stop shopping, you know, a set of suggested core questions that obviously people can add to or modify, a standard collection and aggregation process, so that when all this is over a year from now, well, I don't know if it'll be over or not, but a year from now, we can look back and compare and analyze in a much more rigorous way the results of all of these wonderful experiments that we're trying in our SIGs and conferences and communities. And with that, we'll just end with some resources. So I don't know, Benjamin, if you can click on some of these as we go through. The first one, 5 things to consider before going virtual. I put this one first because it's super short. So some of these other things are pretty big. And if nothing else, maybe you could look at this very short article. I think it's got some good advice. Okay, if you could go back, Benjamin. Then there's the only one where I actually put the URL here is because I think you might actually be able to remember this one. It's just acm.org/virtual-conferences, not so hard to remember. And here you can get a lot of the other things I'm going to point you to, including the virtual conferences documents, the security and privacy for virtual meetings, and the discussion forum. So handy dandy landing page. The virtual conferences document that we already mentioned, the task force report, what we'd especially recommend that you look at is this live Google Doc, the 47-page version with many, many helpful appendices, and in particular reports from many of the conference organizers you're going to hear from next. So this is a great thing to be aware of, and it's also editable. We'd love for you to be submitting reports about your conferences, making suggestions, adding to it. And then there is a discussion forum. You can get a free ACM account to use it. So probably everyone here has one, but if you want to point other people in your community to it, it's nothing they have to pay for or even be a member. So we're trying to move a lot of questions and email to there. Then the Technology Policy Council, the US-based one in particular, produced a statement of principles. This is another really short one. It's like 2 pages. So like really pretty short, targeted list of suggestions, principles for security and privacy. And in virtual meetings more generally than conferences, because we're also concerned about the way virtual conferencing technology is increasingly being used in, church services and counseling appointments and all sorts of things, and the issues are broader there. And again, there's a longer live Google document, very much like with the virtual conferences. This one, I forgot to write down how many pages it is, like 20-ish, I think, but it expands substantially on just the short principles. But each of those principles it elaborates on and gives more examples and references, and so those are some handy dandy references. And I think with that, we are going to stop talking and open this up for questions. I know there's been some coming in the chat, but I haven't been watching too carefully.
Let me ask you one from the chat. So Nicole Molika asked, do you have guidance for post-conference surveys of the participants?
Exactly. That was my wish list item. I don't think we're far from that. Asplos did a wonderful survey. Benjamin, especially, I think, put in a ton of great questions, and they just thought of a bunch of great questions on their own. Other conferences have been surveying their attendees, and maybe some of them have taken inspiration from some of those. But I just think we're crazy not to spend a little time regularizing that and having data collection that we can really look at over all of our conferences. And honestly, we're probably like an hour or two's worth of work from that. I always underestimate. It's probably, okay, well, that's probably 10, 15 hours of work. But, that 10, 15 hours over, spread over how much that will benefit our community to have good comparable data. I really think we ought to get this done. And maybe someone could help with that, because we're swamped. We've been trying. We're digging hard in the hole here, and we could use a little help.
Other questions? What happened to the raise hand button? I had it on my screen at some point, but now I cannot find it anymore.
Oh, there's a question about hybrid conferences. Shall we address that right off the bat?
Yeah, that's a good one. Thoughts on hybrid conferences?
So hybrid conferences always comes up because everybody wants to get back to at least some physical conferences. So, you know, why not do it as soon as possible and have some people there physically and some people dialed in? And sadly, so of course there are going to be experiments with that. But sadly, from everything that I know and my collaborators in this effort, it really seems to be a lot harder to get right than either a plain physical conference or a plain virtual conference. And if you want to know why, just think back to the last time you were in a Zoom call where 5 of the people were in the same conference room, and there were 15 or 20 other people scattered around in their own dining rooms. How much fun did anyone have in that Zoom call? So scale that by 10 or 20, and that's why hybrid conferences are hard, or 100.
Okay, and another question came up about days of the week. So the question is, much like hours of a day can preclude people from participating, so can days of week. Please be inclusive to parents and think twice before scheduling things for the weekend. Any thoughts on that from the task force?
I mean, that is, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I think that now is a good time to just rethink a lot of practices that we have been using even for physical conferences, right? That we expect people to travel, and we expect people to travel during the weekends and then stay for the weekend after. And so now it's a good time to kind of rethink. You know, maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe we just stick to times where, you know, it's part of our job in a way to network and find out what's going on in our community. So yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
But also
there's a larger point.
Oh, sorry. No. Go ahead, Benjamin.
There's a larger point to be made about people with kids. Just at the moment, it may get better in a few months. But speaking from experience, I can say that the world has really divided into 2 groups. And I'm sure most of you know this. There's the people that are being extra super productive because all of their hobbies disappeared. And there are the people that never get any sleep or get any work done because their schools and preschools and daycare disappeared. So that's a large group, and as conference organizers, we really need to be sensitive to the fact that people have a million distractions, not just kids, but kids are a huge one.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that I think by recording so many things, we may be giving people an opportunity to time shift consumption out of the weekend or into the weekend or into the night or into the morning, whatever as they see fit, which I think is good for everyone. It doesn't help if you're the one giving the presentation that has to be there to answer questions at a certain time. It actually may mean that when you're presenting a paper that you end up presenting it 3 times so that you can answer questions. So it's maybe upping the burden on presenters, but maybe that's a reasonable trade. If you have a paper somewhere, maybe you're, you know, should be willing to take on a little more heavy lift to help everyone else consume it easier. And I also did just want to quickly say, I saw, I think, is it Joan Feigenbaum who said in the chat, this will not all be over. And I 100% agree. In fact, that's exactly, I caught myself about to say this will be, you know, when this is all over, and thinking, no, probably not going to ever be over.
Yeah. Another question here is, how do we navigate the uncertainty of going physical or being virtual? Do we plan both? How do we manage the finances? Are people willing to pay registration fees? And are the hotels willing to refund if we go virtual? Any thoughts?
Well, let me just tell you from experience, hotels are not very nice. So if you sign a contract, they will likely want you to stick to that contract. And maybe you sign a contract that does not have any penalties, but chances are that you did. And if that's on the contract, that's what's going to happen. So I just been involved in the conference in ICSI last week where they had signed a contract with the hotel and they could not get out of it. So basically they had to pay like something like $70,000 or something like that to the hotel. And so that is definitely something that I think all organizers should have in mind in the next year, probably. If you are in a position, or two maybe, if you are in a position that you must sign a contract, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't. And so with respect to registration fees, again, conferences are all over the place. The conference that I helped organize last week, ICSI, we had registration fees. And in fact, the registration fees were low enough for the majority of participants, but the total amount that the conference was able to raise was actually, they came out green. They came out with a profit, a small profit at the end after paying for the penalty of the hotel. And so this could, the registration fee could have been even lower if they didn't have to pay that penalty of the hotel. That's something to have in mind, because the numbers, the cost functions for virtual conferences are completely different from the cost functions for physical conferences. So there's something to have in mind, that you can really lower the registration fee. But yeah, I mean, but I also delegate to the rest of the ACM, the ACM staff and executive committee, of whether, it's okay to go in and sign contracts, knowing quite well that there's a 50% chance that it won't happen. But
Donna, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah.
So we are encouraging volunteer leaders to be conservative when we sign hotel contracts. We do have a great deal of history on each of the conferences, so we can bring that history down to percentages, 50%, 40% of what we've done in previous years.
Also, I was just going to say that Donna and her team, I think, did an amazing job of renegotiating a bunch of conferences. Isn't that true? Didn't you kind of get us out of a lot of cost and penalty in some cases? And I would imagine that ACM headquarters would be able to help wisely negotiate clauses into contracts, kind of know a standard set of things to ask for, best practices for that the vast majority of us volunteer conference organizers wouldn't have to think about that piece too much.
Let me take one question myself here. So a question about interest in follow-up meetings for example, for all the conferences that will be in spring 21. Donna and I have already talked about that, and the answer is yes. We will be very happy to help organize meetings for conferences that are happening at similar times, so we can all discuss what to do. Let's take 2 more questions before we move on, and we will get to many more questions later. So there's a question about hybrid conferences. What about demo sessions if the conference is actually hybrid? Any thoughts on that?
Actually, for a lot of our field, it depends, of course. If you require some physical devices and stuff, it's kind of hard to emulate in virtual space. But a lot of our demos tend to be demos taken off computers anyway. So they actually map really well for virtual demo sessions. I guess people have been very creative in recreating the demo experience in virtual spaces. So the demos actually, I'm not worried at all. I think demos are really good to have in virtual space.
Yeah. A simple question here to end this part. We know that ACM has a Zoom license. What's the number of participants that can be in a meeting on that license?
Most licenses are for 500, but we do have available 1,000 and 3,000.
Ah.
Donna, is that for meetings or for webinars?
Our licenses are for meetings and webinars.
Okay.
Wonderful. Very good. Thank you. Good. Let's take a break from the questions for a little bit and move on to the conference reports. And we have Jenna Matthews as our session chair, and and continue to ask questions, as many as you can. Jenna, over to you.
So we have a great resource here in a list of people who have concrete experience with this. They're each going to present for 10 minutes, 5 people, and then we're going to have another session of 30 minutes for questions. The first person who's going to be speaking is Jim Laris, and can someone give him co-host ability? He was the general chair of ASPLOS 2020, which was scheduled to be in Lausanne, Switzerland on March 16th through 20th. So March 16th through 20, that was, a huge surprise. So he was among some of the first folks. It wasn't, on February 29th, they decided to cancel that meeting and move the conference online. So without a lot of forewarning, they did an amazing job. So Jim?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to be here. Can everybody hear me? Good. So I just have a couple of slides. So a more detailed report, which I wrote up after the conference along with my program chairs, Louis Seze and Karen Strauss, is online. We put it on the ACM blog. It contains sort of what we did in more detail than I'm going to have time to talk in, as well as the survey that we did of attendees afterwards with some specific data. Let me just do the key takeaways. You can do a conference online really fast and cheap. We did ASPLOS at a cost of $0 beyond what we had spent for the live conference. We actually did not charge anybody admission, and we refunded all of the registrations to the conference. And even with paying a penalty to the conference center and to the event and paying for all the expenses related to program committees and so forth, we were able to use industrial funds and still end up in the green, in the black. So it's quite cheap to do it. We used the free Slack. We used SIG Arch's YouTube channel to host videos. It worked pretty well in that sense. And I sort of see that as one of the real advantages of that. Another thing we did is we made it very clear to people that they were welcome to attend ASPLOS. It was going to be online. We did it in very short notice. And we also told people that it wasn't going to cost anything. And as a consequence, we had 3 times the normal ASPLOS attendance. It's usually about a 350 person conference. We had over 1,000 people on the Slack. And this is not just us. I think all the conferences that have gone online have seen 3 or 4x increase in attendance. And we asked people about this on the survey, and a lot of people said, yeah, this is fantastic. My job doesn't let me travel. I don't have the money to travel, and I always wanted to attend ASPLOS, and this is great. You guys should do this more often. People liked the recorded talks, in spite of the fact that they were done pretty quickly, given the compressed time frame, and people didn't have a lot of experience in doing recorded talks, and there were a few that didn't turn out great. People liked the fact that the talks were reported. They thought they were higher quality than regular conference talks. Personally, I observed the interaction on Slack channels between speakers and people asking questions to be much higher quality than the kind of conference questions you get. On the downside, people said, it's too bad I didn't get to travel. They like to travel, particularly when someone else is paying for it, which many of us do. And that, I was surprised that people were that explicit, but that came out from a number of responses. As already been discussed, time zones are a challenge. The ASPLOS community is in all 3 time zones, in Asia, the US, and Europe. And if you look at the response to the survey, it was pretty evenly spread. So there was really no good time to do that. We took a very simple approach and basically had all of the talks pre-recorded. We put them online. We put them on Slack channels with pointers to the talks that were on YouTube. I wouldn't advocate this. This was the fastest thing we could do. We didn't really have a better solution to it. the interaction was less than you would expect. On the other hand, people were able to find it. Slack turned out to be a bit of a confusing mess the way we used it, but people seemed to be able to find things anyways. The downside also is the engagement went way down. If you look at the number of talks that people watched, that's the chart off to the right, more than 50% of them said they watched 1 to 5 talks. I don't know about you, but when I go to a conference, even if I talk to people, I see more than 1 to 5 presentations. So, you can see that as sort of good or bad, but that's just the way it is. There was a very widely expressed sentiment that they missed the interaction with other members of the community. We did not do very much in terms of interaction. We did not have the time to set it up, nor the insight that's in the report and the experience of the other conferences. We could have done much better if we had had the time, but we didn't. And I sort of fully agree with that, both in terms of the ASPOS conference and my experience at other conferences this summer. The interaction is very difficult. So just stepping away from this a little bit and getting my thoughts on it. I think this quote is actually quite appropriate, is that, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And it has pushed our community and lots of communities to do something that they would not have done otherwise, which is to move online. A couple points about that. One of which is the technology that made all of this possible, that makes this meeting possible, is our technology. We developed it as a community. The system, the networking, the hardware, the software, the video encoders came out of computer science. Frankly, I think we should be claiming credit for actually making it possible for the world to continue working, or at least for a good segment of the world to continue working in spite of being locked in their apartments. And I think we've undersold ourselves. I would also say that we should perfect the technology. What we have now is far from what it should be in terms of conferences, and we should use it. When I was at Microsoft, there was a sort of slogan, which is pretty common in the tech industry: you should eat your own dog food, which is to say you should build tools and you should use your own tools and not view them as something for customers, but something that you need to use yourself. And I think that we have a real opportunity as a community to sort of push the technology for doing online meetings and conferences ahead very fast. But I would also say, and I think this is the point where I diverge from the report, is that we should rethink what a conference is. A lot of what the report is basically best practices for reproducing a live conference, a 3-day conference with interactions in the halls online. Frankly, I just don't think that's the right format when you go online. I don't know about you, but if I don't travel, it's really hard for me to block out 3 days worth of uninterrupted time to watch the talks and interact with people, regardless of how we balance the time zones. One of the advantages of traveling is that it forces you to do that. I'm not in the office. I have a lot more opportunity to do this. I think shorter engagements work better than longer engagements. I've been on lots of webinars that are 2 or 3 hours, where people are really engaged for 2 or 3 hours, where it wouldn't work if it was a full day. So I think this is also a time where we should really be rethinking what a conference is for ACM. We don't have to do it for 3 days just because that made sense in terms of the number of papers we presented, in terms of people's travel. We should rethink what we want to do. And we should also sort of make the technology work better. I think, I don't remember who presented that section. Yes, the social networking is extremely important. I don't think we're ever going to get it to be the same, but there are really strong social networks online. We need to figure out how to make that work. And I think that extends beyond just the conference itself. It extends into the community for a much longer period of time. So again, I encourage people to think more broadly and think about what a conference should be now that we're doing it online. So that's my presentation.
Terrific. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. Next up, we have Tomas Cerny. Can you grant him
Let
co-host?
me just stop sharing. Did I stop
So
sharing?
first I'll check if you can hear me.
Stop
Yes.
sharing. There we go.
So Tomas was the conference vice chair of the Symposium on Applied Computing that was supposed to happen March 30th to April 3rd, 2020. So again, super early in this process. Over to you.
So hello everyone, I hope that you can hear me and you can see everything on my screen. So my name is Tomáš and I'm from Baylor University. I also would like to introduce myself that I have been working for ICTC for over 10 years as a lead developer for some of the things there, ICTC's programming contests. And I happen to be also the vice conference chair for this conference. So I will introduce first how did we handle the situation with money reimbursement, and then I will share with you one of the solutions that we have come up with. So our conference was scheduled on March 30th, and we had approximately 400 participants. Czech Republic was the first country in Europe that closed the borders. However, already a week before, they canceled all large events above 100 participants. So this was the time frame that we could operate with, and we had to come up with a plan B. Well, in fact, we were already thinking to cancel because people were asking us, oh, do we really need to go? You know, we are worried to come, but if you don't cancel the conference, we have the ticket, we basically cannot do anything, right? But the problem is, if we cancel, who is going to be responsible for that? Who is going to reimburse the people that already have a ticket? So we could be the ones who is supposed to be blamed for canceling the event, right? So I tried to be very active. I sent emails to the Prime Minister and the Healthcare Minister, showing an example that Austin, Texas already made a state of emergency, which basically would solve that issue, that it would not be us canceling the event, but it would be the host country canceling the event. And in fact, in 4 days, we received a letter that they canceled those events for above 100 cases. So that was great for us because suddenly we had the reason to not make the event. However, then we were struggling with what comes next, right? So the hotel was able to reimburse us completely. We didn't need to spend anything for the hotel, for the venue. We got all the reimbursement. That's basically the reason why we were able to refund all the registrants. So basically all our attendees, probably similar as in the previous conference, got all money back. And they still got to present, they still got the publication, and they are cited in ACM Digital Library. So what were our options? One option is to cancel the nothing, and we were seriously considering that. But you know, we put so much effort into preparing this conference. It was so many phone calls. We just wanted to make it happen. So first option was easy. Just let's purchase subscriptions for Zoom. And maybe by that time, ACM didn't have the license, because I remember discussion that it would be approximately $5,000 to get the license in order to host the conference. And the other option, basically the reason was that the audience is from all around the world. So there is Korea, there is Europe, and there is the United States. So you cannot find a common time zone. And so the discussion was, why would we do online or real time? Why not to do something offline when people could upload the information? And that's basically what we have adopted. However, we were not aware of any system that exists. So within the time frame we had 3 weeks, we decided to develop our own solution. And basically that solution would go by each track. We had 40 tracks, then would provide a list of published papers, just like you have in a regular conference in the same order. And each presenter would have a dedicated page. So what did we do? Basically, to buy some time, we utilized Google Forms to collect metadata and the presentations and the video recordings from the users. So if they uploaded it to YouTube, if they were from China and couldn't use YouTube, they could use anything else. We would just get the link, and we would be post-processing it to embed it into the system. In the parallel, I had 4 students who were actually very well trained to do this, because we had a class on system development and distributed system development. So they have developed a best practice approach system within that time. So we have a cloud-based system that bases on microservices. It has a client-side front end, and it sort of scales well. So what I captured here in the discussion, so I did it here, it is secure. We can limit it so that only people that have an account can access. We can restrict the privacy based on the user role, and it is tested regarding stress testing. First of all, most of the information is in your browser that does the logic, and then we only provide the backend to be a service that provides pure data. So it scales very well. I don't think this would be an issue for any size of a conference. So here is some preview, and I would like to highlight that later there is a presentation by some of the developers about the system. It is open source because we believe that anyone could use it if they like to. And there is also an option which we added later to make a tour. So basically, if you go to the system, there is a button tour. You could directly play with it, and you would see everything that is there without the data that we hide from the audience that is not registered. So track would also have a dedicated page so that the track chair would gain an option to interact with the audience. So they could upload some sort of message. Here is a track that I was supervising that has a video, that has some update. It also has other metadata so that the social interaction could happen even offline, because you suddenly know who is there. You can list their profile. So we even ask the attendees to provide us with the ORCID ID, LinkedIn, Google Scholar, possibly anything else. If we go to one of the details, so there is embedded video, there are slides, so that people can actually look there. Below, everything is bio detail about the presenter. So this is something you cannot do on a regular conference, that you would basically get a profile of the presenter. So sometimes you just see the face, but suddenly you have also access to who that is. In this page, we don't show the email because it's the preview for the public, but if you get the account as a presenter, you also see their email, so you can very easily connect with them. There is also an option for a chat, perhaps not as good chat as if you would use Slack or anything else. However, what I would say, there is no online interaction, there is no real time. But if you make a post on the comment, and you can interact basically in real time, but it didn't happen, at least we didn't experience it. Some statistics, we got 1,000 people visiting. So this is statistics we got from Google Analytics. You can see that most of the users were from the US, but still there is a significant portion of users from Brazil, South Korea, and then if you look below, it's a lot of countries from Europe. We got 20,000 page views and approximately 100 comments. I didn't look to the database recently, but this was when I was making the report for the ACM SIG committee. Importantly said, it's open source, so anyone can get it, anyone could technically use it. Of course, there is still space for improvements. So some sort of summary. I have like 3 slides to share with some of my thoughts. For the programming competitions, we have been developing something that is called a second screen experience. So let's say you go to Opera and you also have a tablet and you are watching some scenes from a greater detail. For the programming competitions, you can be basically organizing your day with your personal assistant. And it is very well established research. This is not something new. We have the advantage that we had a system that we have been using since 2012. So we got some sort of idea how complicated would it be and so on. This sort of system integrates all the social channels. So we have a Twitter, and I think you post something on a Twitter, it appears there. We are even doing some games with that, but it's sort of a different discipline, but I still believe it could be applicable to conferences as well. So if you were in a conference in person, you would have your phone to basically interact with all those events that are happening. Since we don't have the in-person attendance, it could be used as the mainstream. So if I would conclude what I think conferences should have, certainly live interaction is very important. But at the same time, the second perspective of this offline access to the information. So, you know, if you are at a conference, you can go to one session, right? But what if there are 2 sessions that you would like to visit? So maybe this would provide the opportunity for you to actually attend the second session and see both of the presentations you like. At the same time, I remember faces, but I don't remember names. But if I have a face and I have there all the biometrical information and biography, what the author did and so on, I can find out, hey, we have a same interest, right? Maybe we would like to work on some future work. Maybe we would like to write grants together. And that's something you don't get in a personal conference when you go there. You just get the faces. But suddenly you have access to more details than that. And this worked very well. Now I have space for questions and answers. I hope I use my 10 minutes well. I'm just reminding that there will be a demo in approximately 60 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tomas. I think we're going to put all the questions at the end. Next up, we have Alistair Donaldson. Can you give him the ability to share? He was the general chair of PLDI 2020, which occurred in the middle of June 15 to 19. Take it away, Alistair.
Thank you. Okay, so it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to present to you. I was the general chair indeed of PLDI 2020, and I think I was quite lucky with PLDI because I didn't get completely screwed by the coronavirus. Unlike some of the conferences we've heard from already, I had a few months to prepare something. So I'll tell you a little bit about the format of this virtual conference, which was done, under some time pressure, but not the extreme time pressure that ASPLOS, for example, had to face. I've written a pretty long report about virtual PLDI, which you can access from my webpage, and the Google slides I'm presenting here are public. I'll post a link to them in the chat after I finish presenting. So this is actually a very long document because it includes free text responses to loads of survey questions that we posted. And before those responses, there's quite a lot of analysis from me about various data sources related to the conference. So if you're organizing a conference, I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And it also acknowledges many people who helped me organize the conference. And I'm going to focus on details here rather than re-acknowledging those people, but that many, many people supported me in running the event. Here's the overarching format of virtual PLDI. We had a Slack workspace that was used for questions, and everyone participating in the conference signed up to the Slack workspace. There was one channel in the workspace for every track of the conference and one channel for every co-located event. And every event, so the main conference plus each workshop and tutorial, ran as its own Zoom webinar that was live streamed to YouTube. The webinar was attended directly by only the necessary participants, for example, the workshop organizer or the tutorial presenter of a workshop or tutorial, or the authors of papers at the main conference. And it was also attended by folks from China. So basically, we could have had a Zoom meeting that we live streamed to YouTube and only had the presenters and the really necessary people in that meeting and had everyone else watching on YouTube. YouTube's not available in China. So we used a webinar. We invited Chinese registrants directly to attend the webinar, and we live streamed the webinar to YouTube, and everyone else watched on YouTube. So that was the main format that all the events used. For the research track in particular, we had 20 minutes per paper, and we divided papers into sessions as you would in a physical conference, 3 or 4 papers per session. And we opted to have every paper be presented via pre-recorded video, mainly because we were worried about connection problems or faffing around with screen sharing. So yeah, every author submitted in advance a video that was between 12 and 17 minutes in length, and the authors knew they had 20 minutes total. So the longer their video, the less time there would be for Q&A. There was a research papers Slack channel, and we made one Slack thread for every paper. So there were loads of threads on this channel, and we had student volunteers post to the channel with a link to the thread for the current paper to make it easy for people to go to that thread and ask questions. So that's the research papers track. Instead of having keynotes, I put together an Ask Me Anything track where I invited 15 pretty well-known people in the programming languages community to give up half an hour or so of their time, or a bit more in some cases, to answer questions posted from the audience via Slack and asked by a host. So the guest and their host were chatting live on air, and the host would read the guest questions from Slack and the guest would answer them. And that was a really fun track of the conference. Each co-located event, there were about 6 or 8 co-located workshops and tutorials, used the same overarching format, which they customized to their needs. Some of the larger events, like the International Symposium on Memory Management, also went with pre-recorded videos and live Q&A, and other workshops that had a bit more flexibility in their schedule went for fully live talks. The timeline for the conference we opted for was 5 a.m. till 5 p.m. Pacific time every day, so 12 hours per day. The thinking there was that that time zone, while it is exclusive of certain countries like China and Australasian countries, for example, for many countries, there was a decent chunk of time where the conference would be accessible. We didn't have very long gaps, so we had 20 minutes between every research paper session and a single 1 hour break per day, but those gaps were mainly filled up by the Ask Me Anything track. I'll come back to that shortly. For the hallway track, to try to give some possibility for people to chat to each other during the conference and meet each other, we had two options. One was a product from a company called Gather, which is a two-dimensional virtual world that you wander around as a little avatar. And when you get close to people, their webcam view comes up on your screen and you can chat to them. And then we also used Clouder, which is the platform that was put together for virtual ICSI, which happened, is still happening, and the main conference happened last week. And we got a preview of Clouder for PLDI, thanks to lots of hard work from Jonathan Bell. So we were able to have video chat rooms linked up with Slack, thanks to Clouder. And then we had a number of other Slack channels to support the conference. For example, a mentoring channel on which people could post their services as a mentor. Say, I'm available during the conference to mentor anyone who'd be interested. Here's a bit about me. Direct message me if you'd like to have a session. And then we use Clouder as a private Clouder video chat room to actually execute the mentoring session. And we had a discussion channel and a jobs channel and a couple of other channels. So what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about, in my view, what the positives about PLDI were and the negatives, and with the negatives, maybe some ideas about what we could do about them. So a positive about PLDI, which is a clear positive about any virtual conference, is that it has massive potential reach. Normally around 450 people attend PLDI physically. We had a huge number of registrations for virtual PLDI, in part because we made it free. So we had more than 4,000 people register for the conference. Now, of the number who registered, it's hard to say how many of them then engaged, because they could watch the conference live on YouTube without even joining the Slack workspace. But if they wanted to engage with Q&A, they had to join the Slack workspace. So 2,700 roughly people joined the Slack workspace. So I think that's a reasonable proportion of the registrations. I was worried that maybe only 1/10 of the registered participants would engage because it was free to register. So why not register? And then of those 2,700, just over 1,000 were active on Slack, which means they sent at least one message on Slack. So I would say that the number of people who participated is somewhere between these two figures of 1,000 and 2,700. Twitter is a very popular social media platform, and apparently most Twitter users don't tweet. They passively use Twitter. It's like a news feed for them. So it's hard to know with Slack how many folks were on Slack enjoying watching the Q&A, enjoying watching the live streams, but not actually posting, versus having signed up to Slack after they registered and then never actually engaged with it again. So yeah, the reach was really good. A lot more people got a slice of PLDI than they would have if it was physical. Enjoyment was really good. If you look at the free text responses in the report, a lot of people grumble, and it's clear that virtual conferences aren't for everyone, but a lot of people really seem to enjoy the event. Some because they hadn't expected to, or because they were grateful for something to do during lockdown, but others said that they enjoyed it more than a physical conference. Engagement was really great. So the SIG Plan YouTube channel that we used to live stream to got 16,773 hours of view time during the PLDI week. In contrast, that channel, which has hundreds of videos from many SIG Plan conferences, only got 6,600 hours of view time in the whole year preceding PLDI. So in a single week, we got 2.5 times the view time that channel got in the whole preceding year, which I think is pretty amazing. And I think it's clear that more than the 1,000 or so active Slack users were contributing to this view time. I don't think we were getting 16 hours of view time per Slack user. So I think it's a lot of people engaging in perhaps a rather shallow manner compared with a smaller number of people engaging deeply at a physical conference. And a load of Slack messages were posted for what it's worth. Slack-based Q&A worked really well. I would say there was more Q&A based interaction at PLDI virtually than there would be physically. Of course, there was a lot less interaction in a more informal manner, but for formal Q&A, tons more questions got asked because I think people felt comfortable asking, and because authors could follow up via text after the live session if they didn't have time to answer all the questions fully, or if they had follow-on remarks. And I want to say there's nothing special about Slack here. I think Slack worked fine, but I know a lot of people are critical of it. I've heard, for example, that Slack have blocked users in Iran in the past. So there may be reasons why we don't necessarily want to use Slack in general, but a Slack-like platform for Q&A, I think is really good. And the Ask Me Anything track was a real highlight of the conference for myself, certainly, and for a lot of people, if you look at the survey feedback. And the mentoring channel worked really well. It facilitated a whole load of one-to-one mentoring sessions. And I had 6 mentoring sessions myself. And I found that by setting up a cloud of video chat with someone and having 15 minutes with them was much more productive than at a conference, trying to find a quiet space to talk to someone and potentially being interrupted by someone who maybe saw me and was like, oh, hi, Ali, nice to see you. And I would say, oh, hang on a minute, I'm just talking to someone. Being able to have a private video chat was a really nice way to do mentoring. Negatives, the schedule was way too packed. This is really my fault because I didn't think of the Ask Me Anything track until after I'd scheduled the research papers track. So there wasn't much time for breaks and a lack of scheduled social time. I'd hoped socializing would just work organically. We'd say, Gather's here, Cloud is here, have a look. But I think people kind of wanted to be told when it was recommended to socialize. We didn't do enough to support newcomers. I can't think now why we didn't just have an I Am New Slack channel where newcomers could say, hey, this is my first PLDI, or this is my first ever conference. And then regulars could commit to say, over the time of the conference, having 5 video chats with newcomers by replying to them. That would have been so easy to do. I'm kicking myself for not doing that. So if you're organizing a conference, do think about really lightweight things that don't require much organization that you could do to help newcomers. Time zones are a really big problem. I'm not sure what to do there. Making videos available in advance so that people in a bad time zone could at least post their questions. That's an easy thing that we could have done. And the hallway track, Gather and Clouder worked okay. It was wonderful to have Clouder, an early preview of that. And I think Gather's a promising platform, but they were both a bit flaky at the time we used them. That doesn't matter, that will get better over time. But I think the real question we're all asking is, can these tools ever be anything like the real thing? And should we even be trying to strive to recreate the normal social interactions of a physical conference? Or like Jim said, should we be looking to be more creative and do something different that works in a virtual environment and doesn't try to mimic being there for real? Okay, that's all I wanted to say, and I will leave you with this slide on the geographic distribution of attendees for a few seconds. I'm looking forward to answering any questions when we get to that point. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alistair. Terrific. Next up, we have Madhur Tulsiani, who is one of the general chairs of the Symposium on Theory of Computing that occurred June 22 to June 26. Can someone, oh, good, co-chair, okay, please take it away, Madhur.
You are muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So let me just give a quick summary of the arrangements for Stock 2020, which was supposed to be in Chicago. The dates planned for the conference, which is the dates that actually happened here, is over in late June. I should say that there were a lot of people who helped kind of organize the conference. There was Tim Rafkarden, Julia Chizoy, and a team of local organizers, also a lot of student volunteers. You can find the full list on the Stock 2020 webpage. And I guess Gautam is also in the meeting, so he might also be able to answer questions. Just in terms of registration and fees and finances, we went with a low registration model once we decided to go online for the conference. The registration fees for students in particular was about $25. The participation roughly doubled. The number of people from outside the US roughly tripled. And we had participation from about 33 countries, if I remember correctly. We didn't have too many expenses for the conference. The biggest expense was just publishing of proceedings, maybe some expenses related to the registration website and the program committee meeting. Fortunately, we were able to kind of negotiate a cancellation with the hotel. John, who's at ACM, I'm not sure what he said to the hotel, but we were able to kind of negotiate without any cancellation fees. One thing which we did later is offered to waive registration for students if they just sent us an email if they couldn't pay the $25 or whatever reason. This was started by a Twitter initiative on the community where some people in the community offered to support students if needed, and we just it also posted on the Stock website.
In retrospect, we would have done it earlier. There were a few people who did take advantage of this. The format for the conference, till about end of April, we are kind of going back and forth between the possibility of a physical conference and a virtual version. We sort of finalized the format around end of April. We had pre-recorded videos for each paper at the conference, about 20 to 25 minutes, which was the suggested length. They were all uploaded on YouTube to the ACM channel 1 week before the start of the conference. We had a Slack workspace with information about the conference, some sort of resources, one channel for each paper, for each workshop, discussion on issues coming up in the business meeting, and also some channels for social interaction. Again, this was active 1 week before, and it's currently active till July 31st. Some of the discussion, particularly on the format of online conferences, etc., sort of kept going after the conference, so we've kept it open. Zoom sessions, we had 10 minutes per paper, sort of intended to be split as 5 minutes for a short presentation and 5 minutes for questions. These were in addition to the pre-recorded talks for each paper. We had parallel sessions. The timings were still between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. Chicago time, which is or the central time. This is mostly logistical, that all the organizers were local. The student volunteers who were running these sessions and the organizers who were constantly monitoring them were local. So we hope that the recorded videos in Slack would provide sort of an opportunity for people who might not be able to attend a particular Zoom session to also participate. And then I'll say more about that. Again, we had some social events and using Gather as talked about earlier, and also some other modes, and I'll describe each of them as we go. Okay. For the pre-recorded talks, and yeah, I should say we also ran a survey, and I'll be posting some of the responses, I'll showing some of the responses from the survey. So recorded talks, we sent out instructions to all the authors for preparing their talks, asked them to upload via Dropbox file request, and then the student volunteers went through each of these talks and then uploaded them to the YouTube channel. In general, participants found them to be quite useful. The response was generally positive. And then the number of views, etc., is as of last night. The Slack workspace, again, we created a workspace which was active 1 week before the start of the conference. We had channels for conference information, one channel for each paper, etc. Out of about 720 attendees, roughly 75% joined it. There were quite a few messages, but there was, again, some sort of kind of imbalance. There were some people who were much more active, some who were mostly, hopefully, reading messages. And we also used it as sort of a conference app. So you can see we kind of posted all sorts of access information about the conference also here. And the information was not just limited to Slack. We also emailed at least all the basic information to all registered participants. And there was a password protected page with links to all the Zoom webinars in case. And the workspace is still active. If you want to join it, you can send an email to stock2020@ttic.edu and we'll send you a link to join. There is some discussion in the business meeting about format of virtual conferences, etc. The live sessions, for the papers, we had 2 live sessions each day between 10 and 11 a.m. and 4 to 5 p.m. Central Time. There were also workshops. The way we kind of ran these is the sessions were hosted as webinars with one technical host who was a student volunteer responsible for kind of making sure speakers can sort of share their slides, can talk well, and then sort of also taking care of any sort of adverse events. There was a co-host, which was a session chair, who was just making sure everybody was available for moderating questions, etc. We kind of prepared instructions for all the people involved. We also ran training sessions for all the students, and we were also kind of monitoring all the sessions live via a dedicated Slack channel. And all the sessions were recorded, live streamed, and all are currently uploaded on YouTube and available. Okay. Social events. There were 3 kinds of social events, or at least 3 modes. One which was very popular was junior senior lunches, where sort of like the mentoring, but a little more coordinated, in the sense that we set up a Google Sheet where sort of senior people, meaning faculty, could sign up for one of the 2 lunch slots, or both of the lunch slots if they want to. And students could, junior people, including students and postdoc, could indicate who they might want to join for lunch. We had about 4 or 5 people per senior person. We also had break tables, which were just sort of a shared Google Doc where people could set up a meeting and post a link, and anyone who's interested in the meeting in joining the meeting could add their name. We used Gather, again, this sort of dynamic virtual conference or virtual video conference platform. We used it on 2 days. One day during a sort of a single assigned slot of about 2 hours. On one of the days, we opened it up for about 9 hours. We had about 150 max simultaneous occupancy. In general, people who joined Gather sort of enjoyed it. It was a bit flaky, and we were not entirely sure about using it for more serious events, but I know Nicole will probably talk about much more experience with Gather. Just general feedback from the conference. A lot of the students in general were quite happy in terms of how well they could access the conference. The registration fees was lower, but also they felt that it was more comfortable to approach senior people in a virtual format. Just the recorded videos, people found them to be quite useful, and there's some discussion again on the Slack about doing this even when the conferences are not virtual. The Zoom webinar, some people found them a bit isolating, not being able to see who are all the other participants present. We allowed them to see the number of other participants. Unfortunately, webinar format doesn't allow us to show a list. Meeting formats might be better suited for small conferences. And social events, I mean, in general, yeah, I think there were many suggestions discussed already. But overall, people were quite positive. This is one of the survey questions. We didn't put a hybrid format question just because it's not yet defined, and at least we were not sure what we'd be talking about in hybrid format. So the conference materials, so we wrote a detailed document with all the logistics, about a 10-page document, which is available from the stock webpage. The instructions we prepared are also available, and the materials from the business meeting. We'll post the survey results there soon, and you can email this address, also available, which is also listed on the stock webpage, if you have any questions or if you want to join the Slack workspace. Okay.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Madhur. So we're about to go into our last of these presentations. Because we're not using a chat where you can just upvote questions, I'd ask everyone to kind of think up and queue up which questions you're most interested in kicking off our 30 minutes of questions with after this. So for our last presentation, I'm very pleased to introduce Nicole Imorlica from Microsoft Research, who was one of the executive committee members for the for Economics and Computation, EC20, that took place virtually July 13th through 17th. Does that mean it's taking place right now as we speak?
Yeah, so today is our workshop day, actually.
So we're very lucky to get you.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
So I would like to, as you mentioned, I'm the SIG Ecom Executive Chair. And I co-organized the virtual aspects of this conference with Jason Hartline, whose official role was General Chair, and Yanai Gonczarowski, whose official role was Local Chair. All three of us, I think, contributed equally to making this happen, and we'll hear from each of these people in this conversation. Jason will first take you through the philosophy we had when we were organizing this.
Yeah, cool. So thanks, Nicole. The first thing you can point out is that, well, this event we're running for about a month. Since it's virtual, it doesn't have to be packed into 3 days, and we decided to take advantage of that idea, and that'll come up later. And I want to just, lead in with my summary, and that is virtual conferences on Gather can be better than physical conferences, and we saw that happen with EC 2020. So let's get into some of the details. So when we looked at our goals, we identified 3 things: maximizing exposure for the papers that were presented at the conference, generating interaction for the community, and making it much more accessible, broadening participation as much as possible because virtual is easier for people to join. I'm going to talk about these 2, which I think are the most exciting contributions of what we did to this group. You know, there are some challenges which were already listed. You know, one of our solutions to maximizing exposure was to have many opportunities to see each piece of content. So we had plenary pre-recording watch parties from the 3rd week before the conference to the 2nd week before the conference, so running 10 days, spread throughout the day. I watched 3/4 of the talks at this time, and it was wonderfully relaxing. I never got conference fatigue, and it was a great experience. There were 3 talks in every session and a coffee break afterwards. And there were also parallel watch parties and plenary poster sessions with lightning talks, and then poster sessions for all the talks, all the papers in each parallel session. I want to talk a little bit more about these plenary recording watch parties because this is basically what we did. You can see the number of people who showed up. They were all throughout the 24-hour day. And on the 2nd week, we decided we really should make this open to non-registered participants as well. And so the attendance went way up because authors could say, hey, I'm giving this talk at this pre-recording seminar, and they could advertise the link. So that was super successful. And actually, after pre-recording, already more people saw talks than would have at our usual conference. So I want to talk about physical interaction between participants, and this is where the Gather platform really shone. And I want to say, so we decided to run our conference entirely on Gather, and different from just having it on coffee breaks, because if you're not entirely there, many people aren't even going to show up for this weird Gather thing where your first 5 minutes are a little bit awkward learning how to do it. And we knew that if we had all of our content in Gather, then people would be stuck there, and the interactions that Gather affords would happen. And we were right. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. So here's some slides which you can look at in the shared slides, but rather than talk about this, I want to demo it. So Nicole and Yanai are also in Gather right now, and we're going to switch over. So you should be able to see us now in Gather. Hi Yanai, hi Nicole. First on our agenda is we're going to go see, actually Yanai I think is going to tell us about the watch party experience. We've got a watch party queued up in room A. And so I can use the calendar over here. It sees there's it's a watch party in room A. I'm going to click it to see, oh, room A is right here. We can walk down into room A and go find this watch party. Yanai, do you want to lead us there?
Okay, thanks, Jason. So what you can see right now, Jason, if you could press X to interact.
So I'm going to press X to interact. And
so what you see now is what's playing in the room currently. You can see we had this slide between every 2 talks. Right now is the Q&A for the talk listed above. There are 30 seconds till the next talk, and you can see what's up next in each parallel session. And when the time reaches 10, you're not going to hear it because I think, Jason, did you share audio?
I'm muting the audio.
You muted audio. Okay, so when it reaches 10, there will be my voice saying the talk is about to start to stop any discussions, and then the talk will start. So just to give you an idea of what made that work. So when we started demoing products, we actually sat at the product demos of close to 20 products, Zoom, Gather, Discord, Hopin, Run the World, Wova, Bizabo, Teams, Kaltura, GoToMeeting, Facebook Live, WebEx, Twitch, Big Blue Button, Workcast, Underline, I probably forgot a few more. And this is one of my talks at the conference. Also note, I'll get to that soon, that you have this nice speaker view on the right and slides view on the left, an EC logo, and nothing is blocking, like the default in Zoom where the speaker view blocks the slides or stuff like that. So we demoed all these products, then we decided nothing is what we wanted. We chose 4 finalists, which were Hopin, Teams, Zoom plus Discord, and Gather plus Zoom, and we organized big a demo for each one that included about 100 people from our community from different worlds, from different countries, include countries in Africa, Iran, China, to make sure that the tech was reliable. We ended up selecting Gather, but commissioned new features from them, which are the watch parties and different things that Jason and Nicole will talk about soon. I'll talk a little more about the video processing. So we had pre-recording sessions, as Jason said. We did that in Zoom. Zoom gives you a video that has the slides and the speaker, and it looks ugly because the speaker blocks the slides, but also gives you different feeds. And that's where the perfectionist in each of us kicked in, because we didn't want this to be okay, wanted this to be great. So I wrote a suite of scripts using free software, FFmpeg, VLC, GIMP, YouTube DL, ImageMagick, LaTeX, that took these Zoom feeds and transformed them into what you saw here. These videos that overlap but do not overlap, this nice EC logo, these slides with counters, all of the with the countdown timers. Basically, each session was a big timer talk, and then we had the 1-minute videos that I hope Nicole will talk about soon. And we basically handcrafted automatically each of these sessions, and that's what you see playing in Gather. And we indeed had to recruit volunteers, like was said here before. We had 8 tech volunteers who ran my scripts on 100 videos and 70 flash videos. And
we're getting short on time.
Yeah, sorry, so I'll just finish this sentence. From the moment of the materials were submitted, in less than 48 hours, all the individual talks were on our YouTube channels, and 48 hours later, all the combined session videos with the timers were online. And I'll pass it to Nicole.
Thank you. So let's, so after, as Yanai said, after the talks were played and people discussed them in the room chat, which you can see on the right of your screen, there were lightning talks, 1 minute for every single paper that happened during that hour. There were many parallel sessions, but that gave you an overview of everything that happened in that hour. And after the lightning talks, we walked out to the poster session in Gather. So we are going to go there now. As you can see, there's a poster session going on here. You can walk up to the poster and preview it, and there will be a preview of the poster. You can then press X to interact, as Jason has, and you can see the poster itself. The poster presenter can talk to you, so this was an opportunity for Q&A, and you can see Jason sitting there as the pretend poster presenter. And then if Jason will step off the mat, you can see that the poster, you only get to interact with the poster presenter when you're on the mat where the poster presenter is standing. This enabled us to have targeted conversations. So it really helped facilitate this idea. It's kind of like a Zoom breakout room, but you get to self-select which one you go into and which poster you're deciding to see and talk about. And it also, if Jason walks on top of a poster, he can preview it without entering the meeting. So right there, he doesn't see us because we're on the mat, but he can see the poster to decide whether he wants to actually enter that meeting. So it gave him a moment to preview it. And now let's walk over into the West Room, which is where we have a bunch of tables. So you can see we've set up tables and chairs, and these are also private interaction spaces. So this is how we did all of our mentoring, hosted conversations, and a lot of interactive planned events, as well as just spontaneous interactions happened with these tables. Only the people sitting in the chairs can talk to each other. So I can see Jason and Yanai right now because I'm in the chair. If I get out of the chair, well, I guess you can't see that. If Jason gets out of the chair, he can no longer interact with Yanai and I. You can also at these tables do things like have a shared Google Doc if you want to have a conversation or anything that can be iframed on the internet. And so you can press X to interact, and eventually Gather will bring up a Google Doc, which we've hooked up into here, and then you could take notes with one another in the Google Doc. So now I'd like to ask Jason and Yanai if they have anything to add to these comments.
Jason, there's a question here that I think you can best answer. How long did you all spend up setting your gather.town world?
So I wrote a bunch of code to automate it. Their technology is fantastic. They don't know how it's going to be used. And that was the biggest challenge with getting gather.town to work, because we had to come in and know how it wants to be used, and they were not set up for it. So Nicole spent many, many hours on the artwork of these maps. I spent many, many hours wiring up the maps to automate the schedule so watch parties played at the right time and I didn't have to do anything, so that posters were in the right place at the right time and I didn't have to do anything. And as Yanai discussed, he and a bunch of volunteers spent many, many hours queuing up videos so they could put them into watch parties. I want to go back to my slides. We had a lot of comments, but I think that, as I said, people were shocked and surprised that the interaction was like almost exactly what you'd expect at a conference. The point is, you see people in the visual space as you're walking towards a seminar or something, or after a seminar, and you go up and talk to them. Oh, there's so-and-so you know, and you just talk to them. And one of the reasons why we decided we had to be all of the time in Gather the whole conference was that if we weren't all the time in Gather the whole conference, then you're restricting the possibilities for these, pleasant interactions to only a few hours of the coffee breaks, and we didn't want to do that. So in conclusion, it's an incredible technology for conference. There's a huge barrier in configuring the content that is something that I think that we as a community could work on to put together. I've already done a lot of work in this area and with Yanai and Nicole and figuring out how to use it. And the last thing I wanted to say is coming back to this rethinking the scheduling. Like, should a conference be packed into 3 days with 10-hour days, or should we do what we did with pre-recording and having a couple hours a day in various sessions for 10 days? That seems to be a much nicer format for virtual conferences. And actually that goes nicely into the hybrid. You could do hybrid pre-recording sessions and then a physical conference for people who want to travel. Thank you, that's what we have.
That was amazing. Thank you for that. And I think that was an amazing spread from Asplos, which was one of the first, and just did an amazing job putting it on quickly, but said, we put things on YouTube, we wish we had a better answer, to this last one that's going on right now, today, as we speak. And they're actually saying this was better than a physical conference. Like, that's an amazing spread, an amazing amount of learning, and that was awesome. So what questions do people have for all of our wonderful speakers? I have not been watching the chat as closely. One thing I did do was siphon out of the chat links that people put to reports and surveys and Slack channels, and I put them in the conference, the virtual conference docs if they weren't there already. And I will just make that note, because if there's anything you didn't put a link to, or anything you want me to, you can put one in, I'll put it there, or you can go put it there. This would be a great time to gather up anything we don't have. Does anyone else see a question in the chat that you'd like to bring forward? If not, I did notice one question that I thought would be worth answering.
Sorry, let me just say one thing about recruiting volunteers. Our conference was very cheap. It was $5, basically the cost of joining the SIG, $5 for students, $10 for non-students. We promised our student volunteers comped registration for next year's conference, which we hope would be physical, so it would cost more. So just one thought about how to enlist volunteers.
Nice.
So, Gina, there is a question there about from Paul, whether there were any virtual conferences that used food vouchers with food delivery services or student mentoring events.
Did anyone use that?
PLDI, we used it for the student volunteers where we could. So the student volunteers, as one way to thank them for their time, we allowed them to get like an Uber Eats voucher. The trouble was that was easy to organize for the USA and the UK, but it was hard to organize for other countries. So yeah, I promise to take anyone else out for dinner if I ever get to see them physically.
For ICSI, we also did that for not for all student volunteers, but for the live team, the team who supported all the live streaming of the sessions, and those were distributed around the world, and they are being reimbursed right now. But the way that they are doing is that each regional team leader is the person who receives the money, and then they distribute through the volunteers. Otherwise, it just be too much paperwork.
One question I remember seeing in the chat a while ago, I think was from Nicole, about bubbling up a question of, can we mandate that an author present a talk at a virtual conference? Told the ACM has introduced a field in the ACM copyright form to give the author the option to allow being recorded. I think that goes a little bit on, I think we all need to have a conversation about the new requirements for authors, right? So are authors required to monitor a Slack channel for 5 days? Are they responsible to monitor it beforehand, the month after? Are they responsible to give 3 synchronous talks? Are they responsible to do 1 pre-recorded talk in case things go badly and 1 synchronous talk if things go well? What are we asking of them? And actually, I think it's reasonable to ask them to do a lot, because normally we're pretty proud and excited to have a paper, but I think we need to be clear about what that is and be clear we're upping the bar a bit. People should know that going into it. Do people have other takes on that?
So just for ICSI, I did not make a report in this section about the experience reports, because we just finished ICSI last week and I haven't had time to write a proper report. But for ICSI, when people were registering, there was language in there in the registration form to the extent, I forget the exact words, but language to the extent that, everything is being, recorded, and, that's how it's going to work. I think that's probably something that we need to formulate a little better going forward.
I also, for what it's worth, would put a plug in for some kind of registration, not just completely open, and maybe a small fee for a number of reasons. One, registration lets you get people to agree to codes of conduct. It helps you plan a little better to know how many people are really serious about attending, as they maybe had a little tiny bit of skin in the game. I'm definitely curious to see some of the stats about, I know some of the presenters mentioned people who registered and didn't interact. And also, I think as we go from having the DL be completely open, SIGs are going to want other sources of some revenue. But, if you have 3 to 4 times the number of attendees and you don't have any food or any hotel or anything, you can probably have pretty negligible fees that go a long way in doing all the good things we've always wanted to do. Ooh, we got an actual raised hand, I see. But
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
A small fee actually incurs a lot of costs to collect it. If you use one of the commercial registration services, it's going to cost you more than $5 or $10 per person to use the service. And so you're not getting anything out of that. And personally, I think that, it doesn't really matter if people say they're going to attend and don't attend. It's much more important the number of people that actually do attend, and not putting a barrier in front of people, having them try to figure out where they're going to pay the $5 or not, seems to me to be much more valuable, since there's very little revenue that's going to come out of that.
I think if we can figure out other ways to generate the revenue we need to run our SIGs and any, any of the expenses there actually are for the conferences, you think you could still have registration where people had to agree to codes of conduct.
Sure, I don't see any
that's
problem with that.
That's what we did for PLDI. We required registration and we heavily advertised the code of conduct and, made it clear you had to agree to it. We didn't charge anything. And indeed, we got like a significant drop in people who registered compared with people who engaged. But like Jim says, does that matter, given that you don't actually need to predict how many people to feed? You don't need to predict how many people to have space for physically at your drinks reception. In some ways, all that really matters is that people know what they've signed up for, that you have a way to actually advertise it to them once they've signed up. So because they registered, you can email them to remind them. And a lot of people in my survey did actually say that it was a real opportunity for them. A lot of people from African countries and Indian country and from India and various countries where, you know, I think the financial implication of even a small fee might be significant. I feel like, what's the point of charging a fee that's trivial to folks who have the money, but still a barrier to folks who don't? And really, with a couple of $1,000 of sponsorship, or maybe $10,000, $20,000 of sponsorship, I think you can cover all the fees.
I think that could be a good thing too. I'm a little concerned about, you know, like I said, we're opening up the DL and everything, what all that will mean. But we're gonna have to figure it out.
Right? Yeah.
I think Jason has a raised hand, so maybe we could let him.
Oh yeah, yeah. Who? I can't. Can I even see whose hands are raised? I don't know.
Yes,
that
you click on participant list, and it'll show you the.
Oh, there we go. So Jason, your hand is raised. Did you already? That was what you wanted to say, or did you have something else you wanted to say?
I'd like to comment on participant fees. I think that, you know, one of the things we viewed our conference as is, you know, our job was to maximize exposure for the papers. Okay, in some sense, we're providing a service to the authors of generating more exposure to the papers. And in that sense, the right pricing model seems to be charge the authors and make it free for non-authors to attend. And that really enables you to get the most, again, when non-authors go to talks, that's awesome for a conference. You want the most non-authors in talks, but only authors in talks, there can be 3 people in the audience in every talk, right? That's horrible. So I think, and the point is the thing is, the amount you help authors by attracting non-authors to your conference, the more appropriate it is to charge them more because you've gotten them a bigger audience. And so I think that cost to authors would scale exactly as you want it to. And these prices are also already really small. I mean, we're talking like $50 for a virtual conference for authors and $0 for everybody else, or maybe $5 for everyone else. That's my recommendation.
I think that's a really good one because authors don't have to travel or pay hotel or airfare, or, you know, so there's already stuff that they're not doing. And it's like it's the same story as the DL. Anything that's open will get a ton more reads, right? So it's a similar model. I guess we just have to work through it all and, you know, push the pencil and everything. Madhur, you have your hand up.
Oh, actually, I mean, sorry, I was going to say almost exactly what Jason said. This is something also tried at some other theory conferences, not at Stock, but yeah, they have a fixed predictable fee for authors, which tells them exactly how much revenue they're going to get, and then everybody else was free.
Great. I don't see any other hands up. Jason's telling me my mic is fuzzy. I'm sorry. I'll have to investigate that. I wasn't hearing it. Are there
I think
hands
that
up?
Ali, yeah, Ali has the physical hand raised.
I couldn't find the button. After all this work with Zoom, I still can't use it. Krista, I wanted to ask you, and anyone else involved with ICSI, I thought ICSI had a reasonable registration fee compared with physical conference. Do you have a sense as to how well that worked?
So ICSI had a 3-layer registration structure. So the authors paid about $350. Everybody else who was not a student paid $50, and students were paid $25. And student volunteers got free ticket. So ICSI was, with this price structure, we got about 1,300 people, almost 1,400 people in the main conference, plus several hundred more in the satellite events. But so this was more than the normal ICSI. It was not double. So it definitely, when you put registration fees that are not trivial, you would definitely see a gating mechanism immediately. It's not like PLDI. PLDI went free. You got a lot of people registering. ICSI was not that. So the fees definitely gate people. But it was more than there were more people registered and attended. So everybody, actually another thing that happens, everybody who paid the registration fee was active participants. There were no active participants. Everybody participated, sent messages and participated in one way or another. So it's, I don't know whether these prices are the right ones. ICSI was very special because they actually wanted to cover the expenses with the hotel. probably, once we sit down and start planning a virtual conference from scratch, once you start putting what are your expenses, what are your sponsors giving you, the registration fees can be really, really low. That's my impression. So this was, for ICSI, was just sort of a feeling like, let's $50, something like that. We did not model it on a real budget.
So we have 10 minutes left in this session. We could ask specific questions of these organizers, or we could just step back a minute and ask any kind of questions we want about this whole space.
Or move on
Or
if
move
the
on.
question stream
Okay.
has dried up
Looks
for the
like
moment.
Paul has a question.
Oh, sorry,
Is
I
his
was
hand
just
raised?
testing the raise hand button. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Let's give people a minute.
I actually wanted to ask Jason and colleagues more about Gather, if others are okay with hearing more about that.
Please.
We would be delighted. Like, we didn't demo all the features by far, so we would be delighted to re-screen share that.
I mean, I really love Gather, and I was really keen to use it for PLDI. The problem I had with Gather is that the 3 or 4 people who seem to be running the company just seem to like be staying up all night to handle all these conferences, and we couldn't get them to do any customization for PLDI, maybe because they were doing lots of customization for you, or did you get access to their source code, or like how did you manage to do so much? I mean,
we paid them more.
Yeah, this is not cheap.
We basically told them what we needed from them as a minimum product that we would use Gather for the conference, because basically it was like, if we can't, the thing is, like, it really adds a lot of value if everything can be in it. And so the minimal thing you need for everyone to be in it is these watch parties, like the fact that you don't have to leave to like jump into and then so honestly, it was really last minute, and that stressed me out a lot. But eventually it came through, and it really the features that they were able to implement for us really worked out well. We paid a lot more than I think most people paid for it, but we also demanded a lot more from them. We wanted to make sure it was worth their while to prioritize what we wanted.
Can I ask you a question? For example, the watch parties, was it them that did, or was it you? Because it seems like you did a lot of code too. Did you give them that code?
So when I did all of the technical, stitching together the videos that we had pre-recorded, but they hooked up the room such that it worked the way we wanted it to, such that when you enter the room, your mic is automatically muted, your video is muted. They streamed the YouTube content so that the talks are hosted on YouTube to every individual's computer. So they really did all of these things that we asked them for. We just took the features that they exposed to us and reconfigured them a little bit to do things we wanted, like having these collaboration tables with a Google Doc hooked up. I don't know if you have anything to add, Jason.
So deconstructing the Zoom video feeds and stuff like that, was it them or you?
That was us. That was us.
Yeah, that seemed to be a really important key technology.
Here, let me just say that, the way I think about this is, you can't have the World Wide Web without someone implementing web servers, but you also can't have it without someone implementing the web pages and, all the stuff that makes us web pages now, like we have, people doing stuff on WordPress, right? So, Gather is the web servers. They connect videos together, they can play scheduled stuff, but they have done nothing for automating, putting content in, pulling it off of spreadsheets, scheduling stuff, whatever. They've done none of that. And so that is a huge amount of work. And we basically were able to, strip stuff together and piece it together and make it work. And that's the thing that needs like the most amount of work to make this possible for other people.
Yeah, so just to drive that home, so like one example is you saw that when Jason went up to the poster, there was a miniature poster showing that specific poster. So we have a script that takes the poster and turns it into an image of a miniature poster on a poster stand. And so I wrote that, and Jason wrote the script that changes the posters according to the hour of day. And so I mean, we really, you know, it's kind of bare bones, but it gives a lot of flexibility, which what we liked about it.
Okay, I mean, because that's interesting. I'm glad that you are explaining your experience in your customization. Because I mean, so for ICSI, we also developed a platform that we use. It's not Gather. But it does a lot of the things that Gather that you seem to be describing. That's important. You know, like the having the images for posters, engaging people with the content. You know, all showing the right content at the right times. All of that stuff. So maybe we could, you know, it'd be very interesting to see if we can just gather all of these different scripts that people are doing and pulling it all together in a coherent sort of open sourced even platform that a lot of conferences can just use. That would be an interesting thing to do. So that's why I'm very curious. I'm very curious about you know, your Zoom, the work with deconstructing the Zoom API seemed really.
So we did
really
the watch party rooms are YouTube, they're not Zoom.
Yeah, no, but Chris is talking about transforming the Zoom feeds into
the YouTube videos. Yeah.
No,
Yes,
we didn't mess with the Zoom API. The Gather implemented the Zoom API so that people could join Zoom directly from Gather.
Jason.
But then we took the Zoom content, the recordings, and processed that. So we didn't mess with the Zoom API.
Yeah, Chris was talking about taking the Zoom feeds and turning them into the sessions, I think.
I think Joan has a question.
Oh, I want to upload a question in a different space. Lisa Brown asked about sponsors. What was your, across the conferences, what were your experiences with sponsors? Did they pull out? Did they still give you money? Did they give you as much money as they used to?
EC had sponsors pulling out. We had sponsors reducing funding. We had sponsors telling us that next year they're not going to be able to fund us at a very high rate, and we should decide how we should distribute their money across the 2 years. And I'm pretty worried about this as a SIG exec. However, the sponsors that stuck with us, which were Amazon stuck with us for their full amount, which was 20K, and then we had Facebook, Microsoft, and Google at 10K each. Microsoft reduced its funding, for example, to 10K from 20K. The 20K sponsor, our gold sponsor, was really happy with the experience because they had a ton more interaction than they would have gotten in the physical conference in terms of questions and people responding to polls and stuff like that.
Putting that up officially as a blog post that you could like send to other sponsors as a look, it worked really well for these folks, would probably be a wise investment in attracting additional industrial support.
I mean, we're going to write a whole report and we'll include that information.
Very cool. I wonder if the company that pulled out was because their own finances are uncertain right now, or because they don't believe they will get any value from virtual conferences, because that's two really different things. It might be that it just resolves, you know, when their finances resolve, if they resolve, they might be just as happy to sponsor virtual conferences, especially, you know, with what you're saying about the value that they still got out of it.
Let me upload a question from Anders Müller, who asked, for the Gather.town, did you have statistics on how many were active participants?
So we had 1,000 people whitelisted. So we felt it was very important that people had conference badges. So we had Yanai manually pull email addresses off of our CVent registration system and upload them to Gather, and then Gather implemented something where the name that they registered with and their affiliation was the thing that appeared in their Gather profile, and they were unable to change it. And so we had 1,000-ish people, like over 1,000 whitelisted. At any given time, we had 150 to 200 on the platform. And of course, the identities of these people evolve over time. We don't have stats yet on unique users, and Gather is a pretty private platform, so they don't log user interactions, but we have some idea that we might be able to get at some of this using the chat logs.
Yeah.
But I would say that a good fraction of the 1,000 that pre-registered showed up and interacted on the platform.
PLDI much lower because we didn't use, you know, unlike EC, we didn't make Gather be the main thing. It was like a thing to be used now and again. We actually had Gather implement something that would query the PLDI registration database when people logged in, because we hadn't authorized a registration time sharing email addresses with Gather. So we were a bit concerned that we weren't actually allowed to share all these email addresses with Gather, and people are very sensitive about data these days. So actually I had it so that when someone would say, I want to join Gather, then Gather would query the registration database to ask, like, do you know about this email address, and let them in on that basis. So yeah, that worked fine.
For what it's worth, in this, I've been involved with something that's talking about metadata in the digital library. And we've been talking about how it would be cool to be able to collect statistics like the number of attendees at your talk. You know, there's citations and downloads of things, but that's another interesting metric that might be really useful to authors and presenters and tenure cases and things like that.
I realize that that's like a side conversation, but I would be worried about that, because if you're scheduled in a parallel session next to something that's more popular or less popular or in the same, I mean, it's a very, very, very noisy metric for a single paper once things are clamped into sessions and parallelized. I mean, it's a different conversation, but I would be very wary of that metric.
I think Joan has had her hand raised for some time now, so I don't know if you're monitoring that.
I could also respond to this. If it is a URL that is different for each session, you can very easily do that with Google Analytics. So you just include Google Analytics, which is 5 minutes, and then you get all the raw data and you can analyze them with basic data mining skills.
Joan, do you want to, you had your hand up. Would you like to close us out for this?
Oh, yes. So Krista, a while back, made a suggestion of pulling together some of, I'm not sure exactly what subset of all of the stuff that has been discussed in this session she wanted to pull together, but just speaking for ACM and its standing committee on virtual conferences, I think that any byproducts or products or artifacts of your experiences that you can easily make available, you know, for the you know, the collective memory and wisdom of ACM, I'd really like to hear about it, because there's been a lot of very valuable information, you know, exchanged in this session.
We certainly prepared to Nicole, Jason, myself prepared to do a write-up. We're preparing to do a write-up, and this will have a very extensive tech appendix and online materials.
Great, thanks. And any other conference that has such a write-up or could be persuaded to produce one, I guess that would be expecting a bit too much. But if you were planning to do it anyway, please get in touch with me if you're willing to share your results, your findings with ACM.
Joan, were you talking about the call I put out to, if you want me to link it into the virtual conference doc, send it because I'm slurping it up out of the chat? Is that what you were talking about? Or were you talking about something that Krista said? I just want to be clear so that we do our best.
Okay, so first of all, Krista said something. I didn't understand exactly what she was asking people to contribute. She said something about let's pull together all the whatever. That led me to say, if you have some byproducts, some reports, some anything that captures all the wisdom that you have just imparted to us that I could have for the sake of ACM's standing committee, please get in touch with me. That's all I wanted.
Can you clarify who you are? You just come up as JF here, so I don't know who you are.
Oh, sorry. Maybe I'll put my video on. You probably still don't know me. I don't think I know you. So anyway, I'm Joan Feigenbaum. I'm ACM VP, Vice President, and I'm the head of the ACM's standing committee on virtual conferences. So I'd like to capture whatever is fairly easily capturable about all of the great experience you've all had. The reason I don't leave the video on is I tend to find that my audio quality is degraded when I use the video.
So very good. So Jenna, what do you say? We close this session and we move on to the next session?
Please.
Okay.
Gratefully hand it over.
Thank you very much. So now we hand it over to Benjamin Pierce, who will lead the tool session.
Okay, so my job is to immediately hand it over to the presenters. So we will have 3 tool presenters and then again, plenty of time for talking. And the first one, I believe, is going to be Jan, is that right?
It's the software for SAC, right?
That's right.
SIG.
Hi, hello. Hi, hello. Thank you for giving me way. I'm prepared to present, so just let me organize everything.
So Jan is going to be talking some more about the software that SAC developed that we heard a little bit about earlier.
Nice. Can I share the screen?
Oh, somebody may need to give you permission.
Hey, Jan, you're actually a co-host. You're able to share your screen now.
Share screen. Desktop 1.
We can see it.
So you can see these kind of things. Good. So first of all, I would like to start talking about the experience that was given to users of our system. And the first notable feature is that it is effectively a knowledge base. It is a knowledge base with all the tracks and papers that we can consume. And we can consume not only the actual slides that are shared on the right side of the screen, but also the video, what the person is saying about that. And we also share. We also can see the chat that is empty for this example. And we have some details of the person, so we can maybe engage more with that person. And this all suggests that we have on a very high density platform with lots of information that is structured in a very usable way. And this is how the user can consume that. And I think there are many opportunities, for instance, for the thing that we can search, we can for the data. And for instance, if I'm interested in code analysis and software mining, what I can do, I can actually look on the related papers in a very persistent way, and I can learn quite a lot from it. So I think this is a certain advancement in what is going on, and from the technical point of view, I would like also to speak on this, because this is a great versatility, because we don't use any software, I don't know, from as a WordPress or anything like that. But what we do, we coded everything from scratch. However, already there are, for instance, how to put it, there are tools, framework like React, Spring Boot, and so on that are already on a API, very high level languages, and we can use many libraries that make our life easy. And it is almost something like configuring a WordPress or configuring some other content management tool. So in this regards, I would highly recommend this stack of Spring Boot, Postgres database, React, because it is almost just a configuring and there are not so much to code. Plus, there is a GitHub, which is full of projects that are very similar and we can take an inspiration from, as well as our project that is also open sourced. So there are, so I think this is the advancement, and I would like also to speak about the implementation part, because we were able quite this kind of extreme programming going on. So in a couple of days, we were able to set up, the login page. This is already something that has been already solved. This is something that is on GitHub. So we just took some repository, modified it a little bit, and then went on to implement the other stuff. The chat was a bit trickier because we didn't find anything that would be on the internet, so we changed it a little bit. So we have to develop something, and then we developed a prototype that ACM SIG agreed that it is okay, and then after a couple of days, we fully deployed. So in terms of recap for the solution, front end, React, backend, Spring Boot, data collection, Google Forms, database is not Postgres but MySQL, and then we also had to set up the email delivery. Packaging is Docker, and the deployment is Docker Compose. And this everything gives us a huge opportunity because we can tweak every single little bit, every single detail as we want, and we do not have to rely on some technology. And we also got a great help from Google Forms because we just used them to gather the data, and then we exported them into our database. So we didn't have to do all the usual stuff with the security and avoiding scam and data poisoning and this kind of stuff. And once again, I would like to point out that we shouldn't. I think that we shouldn't be afraid of implementing our own solutions and not relying on some proprietary software. For instance, WordPress is a very nice, glamorous thing. However, we can't change anything without a significant knowledge of all those plugins, widgets, and so on. With React, we can go into the code, and with a little bit of a knowledge of React, we can change what we want. So I think this is the main giveaway from my presentation, that with just a little bit of an effort and a little bit of a knowledge, we can use technology to our advantage. We can modify every single bit, every single detail. It doesn't take that much time, and then we are just good. And plus, the second main giveaway, I think, that would be that it is very beneficial for both users and also the presenters to have such a knowledge base, because this is what it is about. Because then anybody can go and grab the information, for instance, for its future research and so on, in a very predictable and stable way. And this is something that is persistent. So
can I jump in? Could you say a little bit about how could someone use this system if they would like to use it, such as an offline solution that could, let's say, augment some of their real-time thing? So what should I talk about? If someone was to use this system, what is it? What are the steps that they need to do? Oh yeah. So first of all, they need to have a server that is running. It is a web server, and it has usually, I don't know, 8, 16 gigabits of RAM. I would say 32 would be the most stable, and there needs to be SSH that we can access the server. And then we would, we need to have a knowledge of how to install all these proprietary software. But again, there is so much on the internet out there that we don't have to worry that much, because what we used actually, we used an Nginx to root everything on the web server that also cared about the security and so on. And and because we had a Docker Compose, we didn't have to do that much configuration, because everything happened under the hood. So that was the... There is a question, and it asks whether it would run on the AWS. So since it's Docker, it can run anywhere. We technically just had a simplification that our university admin let us to use their virtual machine, but basically it could go anywhere. But the current limitation there is that we have to import the data from the Google form. So that would be something probably to improve so that the people could go directly to the system. However, then, as Jan mentioned, if someone would fly, for whatever reason, will be uploading wrong things, it could certainly cause some issue. At the same time, we already have the login for the system and it's secure. So basically we know that you are owner of this paper. We know that you are in this sort of session. This is some metadata that we already got from the conference. So that would be sort of to populate the database. I think that it would be probably at this current point the hardest part of using that system. However, the whole structure is there. You have access to the code. So as long as you have someone who is a Java developer, understands a little bit of React, they can perhaps spend one day in order to tweak it to the situation you are looking for.
Yes.
Jan, how close are you to the end of your presentation?
I think we are very much in the closing stage because I think there is also one more developer from our team, that is Dipta. He wanted to say something.
Okay, can we do that quickly and then move on to the other presentations?
Yeah. So it was just about the question regarding the deployment in AWS. So yeah, so since everything is packaged in Docker, so it's just a matter of is implementation in AWS and even in the Google Cloud or Google Kubernetes engines or a more high-level infrastructure if you want. So yeah, so it's quite easy to deploy.
Yeah, great. So yeah, thank you. So we are giving away, and thank you for your attention. So.
Okay, thank you so much. That looks super, and I hope that you'll put a pointer in the chat or someplace to where people can find out more about what they need to do if they want to try it out.
Sure.
For the moment, let's move on to Jonathan Bell, who's going to talk about Clouder. John, are you ready?
Yep, just a minute. Oop. Cool. So thank you very much for having me here at this meeting. It's been really great to see what everyone's been working on, how everyone's been reacting, and especially see all the different really cool tools that people on this call are putting together and that we're building off of commercial stuff. So I'm here to talk today about Clouder, which is a project that I've been working on with Kristen Benjamin, where we're trying to basically look at the same problem. How do we deliver conferences online? Imagining that we could make the software rather than being locked into someone else. So when we started trying to think about what Clouder should be and what the requirements are and what we need to support and how, we're thinking maybe about, what is there in a physical conference that we want to make sure that we still support those interactions. So of course, a major component of a physical conference is that we have paper presentations, right? Where we have a technical program, lots of people come to the room, see one talk. Maybe we have poster presentations and networking that goes along with that. We have lots of snacking and networking. And maybe if we're lucky, also some like tourism and still networking. The part where you go and explore a new city with your colleagues is like a pretty nice way to meet people and to get closer with them. So as I think we have all come to realize, putting together an online conference is not just a technical problem, it's not just a social problem, it's really a socio-technical problem. And academic conferences, I think, have some pretty unique challenges compared to like trade shows and the other kinds of events that a lot of the big commercial vendors, at least the ones that we looked at, I guess in March, we're looking to target. So these academic conferences, we have like a program, right, of technical content. And then we want to try to encourage social interactions around that, right? I'll give a presentation. I'd like to have people come and, hopefully watch it and talk to me at the end. But I'd also like to be an audience member sitting in that presentation. And, at some point after the talk, like you start talking to the person next to you when you get up and you meet someone and you shared that thing that you were just watching that talk together. So we built Clouder, which is an open source project. The front end is also implemented in React, as you just heard from Jan. It is definitely a great choice. We used it at ICSI, was the primary conference that we were developing it for, but are now looking towards transitioning this to anyone else who wants. We had about 1,500 people log onto the platform overall. It provides the single platform kind of style where you get your chat, presentations, posters, video chat, all in one place. Cloudera is built around this notion of spaces or rooms and monopresence. So here in the screenshot, you can see that we're in the lobby. And in the lobby, you get to see an overview of all of the live activities that are happening now. So these are screenshots from when ICSI was going on last week. You can see that there are these 3 live rooms. The video that's happening each one, you can see that there are 61 people in one room, 86 in another, 74 in another. You can see that we're in the lobby. You can see the 10 most recent participants to join this room. This updates in real time, fun WebSockets underneath the hood. In each room that you're in, you get to see a contextual chat. So I'm like very torn on Slack personally, because Slack is great, but it's really hard for a conference. And I think that what's hard about using Slack for the conference is that you're like doing some conference activities constantly, right? You're watching some video, you're reading some paper, and then you have to navigate through Slack to find the appropriate chat for that. And Slack just doesn't necessarily, by design, doesn't give the kind of customization that we would want. So we built a chat for every room. You also get a global direct messaging that you can do. If you see someone's name, you hover over them, you get to see their like virtual conference badge, everything here they can customize. You click a button, you get a chat. It looks just like Facebook. Cloudera also provides a hallway track, which is our attempt to try to replicate those more casual interactions. I'll step through a few of the main features now. So Cloudera, of course, has the embedded video stream mechanism where we all get to watch a live talk together. You can see on the right-hand side there that there's that session-wide chat that is contextual here. And to try to replicate the idea, the presence feeling of being in a big ballroom and sitting next to others, you can see on the left here, again, the 10 most recent people to join this room. And then if you clicked on that 169 total, it would expand. And you get to see everyone who's there and you could search through it. Contextual chat, and you always have that direct messaging available. So one really interesting thing that building Cloudera allowed us to do with the chat for ICSI was really center chat around the program. So on the left-hand side, I am showing how I've got Slack built out for ISTA, which is another conference which I happen to be the virtualization chair of next week, and chose a different platform just to make sure I gave everything a shot. On the right, you have a screenshot of Cloudera. So in Cloudera here, we're watching a live session. We're in this room, see Atlantic Day 2. We can see the video as it's going on. And then we have a chat that is for that paper. So this is always going to be tagged through. We know where the channel is. We can go back and find this chat history anytime we want just by looking through the program, and we have that potentially archived. Cloudera has a hallway and poster track scheme where participants can make their own public or private video rooms. You can see here when it was being pretty heavily used during ICSI. Really important design feature that we had was we wanted to make sure that participants can see where each other are. So here we see that there was a birds of a feather static analysis meeting, and you can see everyone who's in that room. You click one link and then you're in it, and people will see you there too. We did exactly the same thing for posters. So we have a virtual poster session where authors are able to upload their posters. They can just upload the image themselves directly so that we don't have to have something in the middle there. Click on the poster, you get a video chat with the author. The hallway and poster tracks were pretty well used. So we had 1,500 people on Cloudera in total during ICSI. We had 364 users who used this built-in person-to-person video chat system. 146 of those individuals spent over 20 minutes and 77 spent over an hour for a total of 250 hours. This was something that we found really was much more of a social problem than a technical problem. So if after the end of a talk, a speaker said, I'm going to make a breakout room, everybody come by and say hi if you'd like to chat, lots of people would go in. If that didn't happen, they didn't. Kind of makes sense in retrospect, but trying lots of new things at once, it's hard to see exactly how things play out. Just to talk quick about how much this thing costs to run and how it runs. So app is entirely open source, and the conference gets to maintain complete ownership of the data. The front end is built entirely in React. There is almost no backend. It's built using a platform out of Facebook called Parse Platform. It's an open source backend hosting platform also, and it just totally like hides all of the stuff that we don't really care about. So yes, there's MongoDB underneath. Yes, there's sharding. Yes, there's replication. But for $100 a month, we just pay someone and they will do that whole thing for us. We could have in fact even paid much less than that given what the load actually was on the system. For our purposes, ICSI and most of the conferences that I'm involved with use the great conf.researcher.org platform for building programs and scheduling things. So our system just imports it directly from there. We can make live edits. For doing videos for the live sessions, we were supporting Zoom, YouTube, and IQYI, which was being simulcast within the Great Wall of China. The breakout sessions, those videos were hosted by a service called Twilio, which allows us to scale to basically an unlimited number of simultaneous video rooms. They provide the video as a service. It's less than $0.01 a minute per person. They do the chat also, it's extremely cheap. Twilio gave us $500 just for saying we were impacted by COVID-19. The total cost to ICSI was less than $100 to run this whole thing. And we're using it again at ISTA next week. It is hopefully going to be pretty easy to scale up and scale out. We have a lot of issues that right now on our issue tracker. We have a huge feature wish list. There's obviously a lot that we could do to make this better. And we're always looking for contributors. Still are certainly some open social problems, like how we encourage casual conversation. There were plenty of times that we would have casual hangout chats. There were people who organized coffee breaks and such like this on Clouder, but it's just not the same as being in a foreign country with your colleagues having dinner. I think I'm not going to go through a demo right now. If you're interested in going through the ICSI site, and you can go through the archives, you can see everything that people did there basically in the chat history and the program content. I'd be happy to set you up. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, John. Okay, and then let's see. Is it Elmer giving the talk on Researcher?
Yes, hello.
Great.
Can you hear me?
You're on.
Yes. All right. I'm happy. Oh, wait, I need to share my screen first. Let's see, I think it's this tab. Okay. So I'm happy to be here today to talk about our Researcher platform. This platform is a hosted service. It is a content management system focused solely on conference websites. And the goal is to provide a uniform way for setting up websites for conferences, including the more complex conferences that have co-hosted events and workshops. By having a uniform way of doing this, the platform can provide tooling and data that is reusable for each conference website, and it enables to provide a complete integrated experience for larger conferences with co-hosted events. Now I'll briefly demo our platform. So if I open a website, the PLDI website, for example, each conference website will have a homepage where all sorts of information items can be configured and displayed. Some of these items will automatically be in the conference homepage. And all information will be available from the top menu. So each conference website will have an attending menu, which will bring you to information about the venue or maybe the virtual conference. And it will have some information about registration and code of conduct and that kind of stuff. And then we have the tracks menu that lists all the tracks, research tracks, social tracks within a conference. And in case of PLDI, this is a conference with some workshops and co-hosted conferences. And each of those tracks will also have a page on our platform. So if I open such a track page, it will have some general information about a track. And in case of a research track, there will be a call for papers or contributions that can be configured. And some fields include the call for paper text that can be configured, and a submission link can be configured, but also things like the committees. And when track organizers want to add the committee data, they can just enter the names of the people, and the platform will just show all people that match the name that are already in the platform. So all of those profiles are available for all conferences that use our platform. Another thing is important dates that can be configured, and those dates, when they're approaching, they will be listed on the top level on the conference website, where all important dates from all tracks will get displayed. And then later on, some papers will get accepted, and those papers can be imported into the platform. And we support importing from systems like HotScrap, EasyChair, and Conference Publishing Consultancy. So one doesn't really need to enter all of those papers manually, and the same as for committees, all of those authors will automatically be linked to profiles that are already in the system. And authors will also receive a notification that their paper or contribution is now listed on the website, and they can then, if they like, add more information to the details of their contribution. So, for example, when one can set a DOI link, or authors can add a preprint like it's done here, and then all accepted papers will be listed on the track page. And you can click around and see all of the details. And people can manage their profile, so they can add a profile picture that will be available then for all of the conferences. Yes, and then when the real conference is approaching, track organizers can set up their schedule. So session slots will be assigned to the tracks, and track organizers can then occupy those session slots with the presentations they want to schedule them. And the program will then be available on the track page. And actually, the program will be part of the top level complete program. And this program has some interactive features. So, for example, you can filter by specific tracks and on a specific day, for example. And this allows you to quickly navigate to things you know where they are, but you can also browse just through the whole program and open all details of events. And if you like an event, you can star the items and add them to your personal program. And you can filter on that personal program, so you really get a view only with the events you're interested in. And if you like, you can also share that, you can also synchronize that with your calendar of choice, so it also appears in your Google Calendar, for example. Then we recently added some features such as time zone support. I think this is really useful. So previously, the program was just displayed in the conference time zone, which is Pacific time in this case. And now you get an alert that you can change the time zone to your local time zone. So the program will be displayed in your local time zone. And another thing we've recently added was the ability for track organizers to add session information to the program. And this way, one can easily add links to the live stream, or maybe some Q&A or Zoom link. So all information can be presented within the program. It will be available in the program. I think the program page will be the most important page during the conference. And during the conference, there will be some other tooling available on the program, which I've taken a screenshot of. So you will see which events are actually running right now, and which events are the upcoming events, and how many times left before they start. And I think, yeah, that sums up most of the interesting features of our platform. I don't know if my colleague Ilko has something to add, or maybe Danny.
We should quickly move on to questions also. So
okay,
please,
move on.
Ilko, if you want to say something quickly, please feel free.
No, that's
otherwise
good.
We'll just
Go
go to
ahead.
questions. Great. Okay, so then now it's question time, and I have not been monitoring the chat so carefully. So if there are questions that I'm not highlighting, please post them again. Okay, so there's the last question is interesting. Does anyone have experience connecting in sign language interpreters or captioners to any of these systems, or in other ways dealing with various kinds of accessibility? And I guess anybody who wants to can take that.
Zoom has the facility that you can add live closed caption provided by a person, so you have to pay somebody to do that kind of service. YouTube also has that for live streaming. So for live streaming, you can also inject a person in the loop that will generate closed captions for the live streams. Again, it's up to the organizers to find those people and pay them. But the thing about YouTube is that once you have the videos, I'm not talking about live streaming now, I'm talking about videos. Once you have the videos and the videos are processed by YouTube, they have automatic closed captions that work really, really well. So, you know, if you want to provide it during live sessions, then you need a person. But if it's enough to just provide them after the fact, then whatever YouTube already has is really good.
Great. Who else has questions? Cosmin has a hand raised. Please go ahead.
Thanks for a great presentation and discussion. This is a follow-up on the accessibility around closed captions. So we are working for a non-ACM, ICM Incorporation conference, smaller conference, but we had significant accessibility issues around these social interactions around closed captioning. And so we solved the problem from presentations, and that was fairly straightforward, and several solutions exist. But it was very, very difficult to engage the participants who are deaf around the social interactions. So we're doing a follow-up. So we split the conference in two. We have another version coming up next week to accommodate different schedules. And I paid students because we didn't have anyone available. So I paid students to do the live closed captioning. It does not work very well unless they are very well-trained closed captioneers. Because if you're in the middle of a conversation with 3 or 4 people, it's very hard for someone to manually type the captions, and for the person, the receiving end, to engage in responding to that. So I don't know, I'm not saying we have a solution, I'm just kind of flagging that we try something, it did not work very well. So we'll see how this works. We were trying to do the sign language interpreting, and we didn't have anyone that was fluent enough to put on a Zoom, and wasn't clear how that would work with a small screen. So I think this is an ongoing thing that hopefully we'll find a way to solve it, but I don't have an answer except that we tried and it did not work.
Okay, anybody else? We're at the end of a fairly long Zoom session, so people may be winding down, but we can open it up at this point to questions about anything that we've discussed today or have not discussed today.
I think there were a lot of questions flowing in the beginning of
Indeed.
Yeah, we kind of missed all those questions. I don't know if we can go back.
Anybody want to repost a question? Or just raise your hand and ask it?
We could also try to see if, would anyone do the job of moving over unanswered questions into the discussion forum? I wonder if that's, something.
That's a great idea. And or we should, in any case, remind people about this discourse forum that we advertised at the beginning. So this is intended to be a place for discussion about any kind of issues related to virtual conferences by anybody that's involved or interested in virtual conferences. So far, it's just existed for a few weeks, so it's not very big yet, but there's been a lot of really useful discussion about time zone issues and mirroring strategies. So if you're interested in that, you can look at the archives on that site, and please bring your own issues and raise them for other people. All right, we'll take a few more seconds to let people re-raise questions, and then maybe Jens, we can come back to you for a closing word or two.
Looks like Jason Hartline just posted a question in the chat.
So that's a question for ACM people, I guess. The question is, can the ACM change its restrictions on Zoom rooms and webinars, which were very hard to work with?
What are the restrictions, by the way?
Yeah, what are the restrictions?
The administrators are two of our staff members, and only administrators are permitted to do some of the activities within Zoom. And so we would need to modify that.
So does the ACM actually have a Zoom license and users that are available for conferences to use?
Yes. We have, right now we have about 100 licenses that we have been distributing to conferences to utilize, and they are all in use right now.
Okay, that's good. So just an experience in there for ICSI last week, ICSI bought their own Zoom license on purpose for the conference. We ended up, just so that you know, for that kind of a conference, we ended up with using 10. So we just needed 10 hosts, and one of them had webinar powers. So we just needed one webinar host and just 10 regular meeting hosts for the entire thing. And that's because a lot of the parallel video chatting stuff, like the posters and stuff, happened in Clouder, not in Zoom. So we ended up just using Zoom for the main sessions, the ones that are really scheduled, and the things that we wanted to have a sort of a bigger, a more solid quality to them. But we had total control over the configuration of these accounts, and I think that's important. I think that's what I'm hearing, and indeed it's important, because it turns out that being a lot more flexible is actually better than being super strict, because anyway, it's another conversation. But it's a conference, especially our conferences, there's a certain level of trust between the participants, among the participants, that they will not do stupid things. And so it makes things so much easier. So let me just explain you one very concrete thing for sponsors. So we had Google, Microsoft, and Facebook as some of the main sponsors, and they all wanted to have virtual booths, basically to meet students. And that worked really well. So we basically spun just a long-lived recurrent meeting that anybody could start. We configured so that it could start before any host were joined. So those meetings actually happened without any host whatsoever. So whoever clicked the button joined the meeting, and the meeting was shown as happening now at the right times, and the students and the company people would just meet there, and nobody needed to enter any special password or any special account or anything. It just worked really, really well.
And that we have a question from Suzanne Paul. You have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just have a question on the many tools that we've seen today, and also on the formal licenses that ACM has bought. So will they be added to the virtual conference online document, and specifically with Zoom? it seems that we maybe need to register to get some of the license. So I maybe have missed it, but I haven't seen a process on how to do that. Who do I email to get my Zoom licenses if I'm running a conference? How many can I get, and so on? It would be nice to hear what is the document to watch out for, or the emails, or the person to talk to. Because even though mine's in October, but if I hear that the licenses are typically all used, I should not maybe rely on that, or maybe make my booking early.
You would be working with your conference coordinator at the headquarters.
Who is that?
I'm sorry, which conference are you?
It's the SIG conference, and it's mobile HCI.
You would be working with Sade Rodriguez.
Okay, so far.
I will be sure to send you a message.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Then I have a person to ask. Yeah, thank you. But I would be happy to have I know that the document is growing that you are writing, so I've also at some point contributed.
It would be great to put that in.
Nice to have the links like growing there, because it's a very precious source.
Hi, Suzanne. This is Sade Rodriguez. I'll reach out to you and introduce myself. And
hey, thank you. Nice seeing you here. Great. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. No problem. Nice to meet you as well.
Any final question? Well then, thank you very much, all of you. Thanks to the presenters, thanks to Joan Feigenbaum, who we now know will be the chair of the Standing Committee on Virtual Conferences. There'll be a lot more. We will have a second meeting going on Friday in a week, for more dedicated to the SIGs with multiple conferences, and also some of the SIGs with really huge conferences. And so we're going to have a whole new list of presenters and new discussions. You're most welcome to join a second time if you can stomach that. But for today, I simply want to say thank you, everybody. Thanks for wonderful discussion. I have 4 very dense pages of notes of just the things that interested me that I learned today. It's been wonderful. Thanks for all the people from the ACM headquarters, Donna, who organized this, Daisy, who did the Zoom links and everything. Many thanks. And I wish all of you who are organizing virtual conferences this fall good luck, and please reach out to the ACM headquarters, reach out to the upcoming, it's just started apparently, committee on virtual conferences, and let's just help each other as much as we can. So thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.